welcome to the Riff Crew. I'm your host, Steve Mitchell, back for another big episode here in the realm. And joining me in the capital of chaos over in Washington, D.C. is Skull. How you doing, mate?
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen in Cyberland. As you know, this is Skull broadcasting from the past, present, and future in the Chamber of the Cosmos. Here with my good friend Steve Oz from Ozland. I'm an off-again, on-again DC bomb rock band Black Manta. I've been in the scene for over 35 years. I know people from all over the scene. Also, I worked at the Smithsonian for 20 years and have incorporated my love and passion for history with my love and passion for music. As usual, I'm really excited to be here. And we have a special guest with us here today. One of the original Godfathers of Doom and drummer from Pentagram and Bedemon, Geof O'Keefe. So really happy to have you here. We have a lot of things to talk about.
And I would right away offer a slight correction because people always call like Pentagram one of the Godfathers of Doom. And when we first started out in '71, when Bobby and I formed the group, we were a hard rock band. Our influences were bands like Thin Lizzy, Wishbone Ash, Mountain, Cream, Blue Cheer, and stuff. It's only when we split up with Bobby and then he hooked up with Death Row with Victor and Joe Hasselvander and the bass player was Marty, I think was the bass player, and they were Death Row, and they got into it's funny. They totally got into the really thick Black Sabbath, tuned down, that classic Victor tone, and they became a total doom band. But if you listen back to the Last Days Here albums and stuff, First Days Here albums, well, 1 and 2, they're hard rock albums because we were influenced by a lot of hard rock bands that from out of England and stuff like that. But not a lot of it was Black Sabbathy, though. Occasionally there'd be a song like Ask No More or something, but a lot of it was just like twin guitars and harmonies and, like I said, Wishbone Ash and things like that Bobby and I were really into. So now Bedemon, which was a good friend of ours, Randy Palmer's project for fun. It was never a band. It was just like his favorite band was Black Sabbath. His second favorite band was Sir Lord Baltimore. And about every year or two, he'd write a couple of songs. He wasn't a good guitarist or anything. He just played at his home. And he would call me and Bobby and say, can we meet at the Pentagram warehouse where my dad worked and record a couple of new songs I got? And so every year from like 73 to 79, we'd record a couple of songs and he'd say, Geoff, do you have anything? Bobby, do you have anything? You want to finish writing the song with me or whatever? And those songs were really doomy. Those were because he was influenced by Black Sabbath. So Bedemon, I've seen people say Bedemon was possibly the first U.S. doom band because, 73 and stuff and influenced by British bands like Black Sabbath. That might apply to Bedemon, but Pentagram, I always like to clarify and say we were a hard rock band. We were a heavy hard rock band, but we weren't a doom band. We weren't doing like satanic stuff and really.
Sure.
We were doing more like I say, twin guitar harmonies and trade-offs and stuff. Mm-hmm. So there you go.
Well, how about Proto Doom then? Well, because there were bands like Bang that were kind of doing a little bit of doomy style, and some of those bands were kind of playing around with it a little bit here and there, like Pentagram was.
Right.
But Bedemon for sure is definitely full on doom. I did want to say it's funny that you mentioned we're starting talking about that because today is Friday the 13th. It's Shocktober, which is it's October Shocktober, and it's Friday the 13th. And I just wanted to say, because we were talking about that one of the bands that influenced many bands back then, including Pentagram and Bedemon, was there was a particular album that happened to be released on Friday the 13th. I'm sure you'll be familiar with this when I show you. In February, not in October, but this album, as many people know, was actually released on Friday the 13th in 1970, basically launching the entire movement, Doom, heavy Doom. Well, it wasn't even called Doom then, but it was Doom. And this basically was the blueprint for all of that. So I just wanted to recognize that the connection between Friday the 13th and basically the blueprint for all of the music that kind of came after that.
Now, was that released in the UK on Friday the 13th or in the US? Because I don't think they usually came out in the UK first.
It was
I
the
remember
UK. Yeah, yeah.
a couple of times I bought Black Sabbath albums that were available at an import store, but they weren't out in the US quite yet. And so, I would always say that, Bobby and I had to have them the day they came out. I would call Warner Brothers Records. I mean, back then when humans answered the phone, I would actually call Warner Brothers Records from Virginia to California, and some poor lady would answer the phone, and I'd say, "Yeah, there's a new album coming out by Black Sabbath. Do you know what date it's going to be out?" Let me look. It's going to be out October the 13th. And I said, "Okay, terrific." And I'd call my dad and say, "We have to go down to the record store on October 13th. Me and Bobby, can you take us after work?" And it's like, we go down and get it the day it came out. That was how avid we were about getting stuff immediately. Have to have it right away. Tomorrow it'll be old. So.
Right.
And when it came out, was that one of those albums where you got onto it from the get-go, or you were introduced to it a bit later on?
No. My house was there were 2 or 3 houses in my neighborhood where people would hang out, but mine was one of them. It was an apartment. Bobby and I lived in 2 apartment buildings side by side, 12-story apartment buildings. And my bedroom was on the 2nd floor, and it was a hangout place where shut the door. The parents wouldn't bother us. We smoked dope, and I had day glow things I taped to the ceiling all over the place with a black light. So I'd turn out the lights, and there'd be like red and green stars all over the ceiling, and you couldn't see anything else except that. And I'd put on some music like Iron Butterfly or Black Sabbath or something like that. And 5 or 6 of us would sit around and get totally freaked out. The most freaked out were my parents when they saw that I had scotch taped about 100 stars to the ceiling of a rented apartment, and they said, "You know how much it's going to cost for us to get that tape off the ceiling, because it's going to stick to the ceiling." They weren't happy about it, but they let me keep it up. So so I wanted to hang out, and we would just like put on the album of the day or the album of the week, and we would just like sit there and go, "Wow, this is awesome, man! Listen to that heavy riff and that type of stuff." So Black Sabbath was definitely probably the leader of Doom. I would probably call that the first real Doom album. Just my opinion. Because groups like Blue Cheer and stuff like that, and Hendrix and Cream and stuff, they were heavy and hard rock, but they weren't doomy. But Black Sabbath, from the opening, the wind and everything else, and the bell ringing and stuff, that was doomy. So
they call it the devil's tri-note, or the devil's note, right?
The tritone,
yeah, the tritone that makes that heavy doomy sound. Well, before we begin, Steve and I were talking about this, talking about how Greg Main recently passed away in the past year or so. We wanted to recognize that and give our condolences. And if you wanted to talk about Greg Main for a little bit, just as a remembrance, if you wanted to.
Yeah, he passed away in 2021. He had stage 4 lung cancer. He was a lifetime smoker of everything. Greg Main, I always compare him to, I don't know if you're familiar with the underground comics of the 60s that R. Crumb used to draw, with like, hippies walking down the street with big bell bottoms on. They're just like trucking,
Sure.
I said, that's Greg Main. Nothing bothered him. If anything
the
bad
Freak
was
Brothers.
Going on. Yeah, I mean, Greg was always like, yeah, whatever. If something bad was going on, he never got really like angry and upset. I mean, he generally would just brush stuff off. And so I talked to him like a month and a half before he passed away, and I didn't know he was that close to the end. And he didn't tell me, but he did say he had stage 4 lung cancer. But he didn't, act freaked out about it or anything else. And I got a phone call from a friend saying Greg's gone. But it's just like that was typical Greg. He was like, the thing I'm the most happy about is that when Bedemon played our one and only gig in 2015, if you're familiar with Pellet is the guy who was in the Last Days Here movie, who basically tries to rescue Bobby the whole movie, gets him out of jail, and he has the wire rim glasses and the long hair part in the middle. And he got Relapse interested in Pentagram's 70s stuff before they knew about it and stuff. Pellet has always been the rescuer and everything of so many things. He got Bedemon's second record label. He got us connected with Svart. So he called up and early in 2015 and said, "Is there any way you could put together a lineup of Bedemon for this Psycho California show coming up in later in the spring in 2015?" And I said, "We don't really have a lineup of Bedemon because Randy Palmer passed away in 2002 in an auto accident. I was the drummer. I played, some of the guitar solos and stuff. And Mike, the bass player, had a day job doing sound for like a reality show, like holding the boom mics and stuff over, it's an outdoor reality show. But he was off at that time. So we said, okay, well, I'll get something going, So we talked to Mike, and I found a local drummer who works at a record shop here, who's a huge Pentagram and Bedemon fan, before he even knew I lived here, because one of the coworkers said, Geof O'Keefe lives here now. And he goes, "You're kidding? From Pentagram?" He goes, "Yeah." He goes, "I'm in San Miguel. He's 40 miles away." So Frank Hayes played drums, and I played guitar, and Mike was going to play bass. Well, a month before the show, Mike got the word that his new season of the reality show he worked on was starting on the day of the gig. So Mike had to pull out. So the bass player of Bedemon, who's on all the Bedemon albums, couldn't play. So we had to find another bass player. And I don't remember if it was Pellet, but someone said, "Why don't we get Greg Main? You haven't played with him since 1976 in Pentagram, and people would be blown away to see you and Greg Main on stage together for the first time in
Wow.
forever." So we contacted Greg back on the East Coast. We paid to fly him out and his 5-string bass, and paid for a hotel for him to put up. And he wound up playing bass at the Psycho California show on Friday. Pentagram closed the show on Sunday. But I am so glad, because I hadn't seen him since I moved in 1988. So I'm so glad that Greg got to come out here, and I got to play with Greg one last time, not knowing it would be the last time, because he and I always talked about it would be great if I could move back there or something, and we could like put a new band together, and do some Pentagram covers and do some new stuff and whatever. And I had no idea that he was going to be gone, but I'm so happy that we got to do that show in 2015 and play together. And it's on YouTube. I mean, the whole show is on YouTube. The auditorium shot it, and people in the audience shot it with their cell phones from different angles to get different sounds and different views of all the members on stage and stuff. And we didn't have a singer either, because the singer on the first album was Bobby, and the singer on the second album was a guy who lives out here named Craig Younghandle, who was the manager of a record shop, a different location of the same shop that the guy worked at where Frank works, the drummer. And he said, "You should check this singer out, who's the manager of Boo Boo's Records, because he does karaoke and stuff, but he does everything from Tom Jones to Rob Halford to Black. I mean, he sings anything and everything. He's got a great, powerful voice, and his dad was a lounge singer as well." So Randy didn't want to work with Bobby. That was one of the options, because we recorded the backing tracks in 2002 with no vocals, and it was like, do we want to work with Bobby or not? And Randy had some issues with Bobby. He was really worried about the drugs. I mean, he was afraid that if he hung out with Bobby, went back to the East Coast with the backing tracks, and then was driving from South Carolina up to, I think it was in South Carolina. He lived in Greensboro. I can't remember if it's North or South Carolina, but he would drive up to DC and work with Bobby, and he was afraid that Bobby would say, "Let's go get some drugs," and Randy was trying to stay away from that, and he was afraid that would like lure him back into it. And he also, around the time of the early 2000s, Bobby was doing those albums where he did them with just Joe Hasselvander playing all the instruments, and Bobby's singing was his singing changed a little bit. He was singing kind of a funk style, a funk heavy metal style, really, oh yeah, like James Brown kind of, stuff like that. And Randy was like, "I miss the old Bobby." It sounded like Ozzy and Iggy. That's those were the Ozzy and Iggy were the Bobby vocals that Randy loved, and he wasn't crazy about the way Bobby was singing right in around that time. So he said, I just don't trust myself, and I'm not crazy about the vocals. You know, it's nothing against Bobby personally. I just don't, you know, I don't want to put myself in that position to get lured back into the drugs and stuff. So I said, well, I've got a line on a singer out here, and I got a demo tape of it. I sent it to Randy. He said, that guy's awesome. He's got a great voice. You know, definitely can use him and stuff. And so we wound up using Craig Younghandle. And the sad thing is, Randy never even talked to Craig. He never met him. He just heard the demo tape, and then he was in the auto accident, which was a tragic situation where his fiance bought her son a car, and they were going out to celebrate afterwards for dinner. And as they were going through a stoplight, some teenager in the car ran a red light and broadsided the car that Randy and Taryn and her son Nick were in. And Randy was on the passenger side, and he lived a week in a coma and then passed away. So he never got to hear the final album. He never got to even meet or talk to Craig. So it's kind of a bittersweet album. It took me like 10 years to finish the album, with trying to find time, trying to find the studio time with our engineer Sean to get the vocals. I had to finish writing the songs because Randy's demos were him sitting at a kitchen table with a cassette player and a guitar, and that was it. He didn't sing, no other instruments. He would just sit there and go, oh, there's a Bedemon song. It goes down to D, and that was it. So I had no idea where the lyrics went. He would type up the lyrics, so I had typewritten lyrics and riffs, and I didn't know where the songs started and stopped, where the choruses went, what the melodies were. So I basically had to finish writing the whole album because I had no idea where he wanted what and what melodies he wanted. I could in theory have given myself 50% credit on all the songs Randy wrote, the 6 songs, because you know I had to finish writing them, but I wouldn't do that. They were his songs, you know, and so I had to guess, knowing his taste in music with Black Sabbath and Lord Baltimore and stuff like that. He probably would want this here. He probably wanted to sound like this, and I had to teach this all to Craig, who had never done original material before. He'd always just done covers in karaoke bars and stuff. So it was new for Craig. It was putting together Symphony of Shadows was a real labor of love. Like I say, it took a full decade from the time of the accident, recording vocals, mixing, mastering, and then Pellet, you know, searching for labels to release it, and finally finding a Svart in I think Norway. Yeah, that's kind of the Bedemon story. But your original question a few years ago was about Greg, and I'm just very happy I got to play with Greg one last time, not knowing it was going to be the last time. But you know, after a long period of 19 years, you know, 76 to 2015, I got to see Greg again and play with him on the stage. And the audience loved it. I mean, you know, when I introduced Greg Main and put my arm around him and stuff, they were like, you know, 2 guys from the 70s Pentagram. It's awesome, you know. So that was cool. Yeah. He was one of the nicest guys I knew. I mean, like I say, nothing bothered him. He was just a typical laid back stoner hippie type guy. You know, just mellow, and didn't get real angry or didn't talk real fast or didn't get sarcastic or anything. He was just, you know, yeah, man. And he would tell stories that never had endings, kind of like this one I'm telling right now. They never had endings, and people kind of like look around the room. It's like, okay, we get it. It's been like 20 minutes you've been telling this story about, you know, this one gig you played or something. But he was the nicest guy. He was just such a nice guy, and I wish he was still around. So I would still love to I still love to play with Greg. You know, the ironic thing is, I know I'm answering more questions than you're asking. You guys could just go if you want. Is that, you know, Vincent and Greg and I talked a number of times before Vincent died in 2006 about, do we want to work with Bobby again? Like maybe do 4 or 5 gigs, DC, New York, LA, Denver, videotape them, you know, live record them, or do we want to go into the studio and maybe do a proper studio album of some of the old songs that never got done properly? They were just the warehouse rehearsals, which don't sound great. The songs are great, but the quality is not great. And some new songs, right? And we really debated this a number of times about wanting to want to risk working with Bobby again, because every time we have, it's been a disaster, and it has been for everyone else too. And right around this time was the infamous Black Cat episode, which is shown inside in the Last Days Here movie, where Bobby came on stage. Okay, well then he walks on stage. They're about to do Wheel of Fortune, which is a song I co-wrote with Bobby, and he just falls back into the drum kit because he was on something. And the poor band Internal Void, which he was working with, he had a whole new band on this album. I think it was the Show 'Em How album. And so, other than the singer who was left out left out to dry, it was the entire Internal Void album, and they recorded this great album with him. The drummer was super nice. He was emailing me all the time, telling me how much he liked the drum rolls in this song, and he was trying to duplicate my drums in this song and all this type of stuff. And Bobby, blows it on the very opening gig on the record release party at Black Cat, and that's when Vincent said, "I don't want to do it. We're going to go out there to DC. We're going to spend a lot of money, and Bobby's not going to show up for practices, or he's going to show up screwed up on stage, or whatever. Something bad will happen, because that's what the Last Days Here movie was basically about. Was how many chances has Bobby been given that he has basically shot himself in the foot, and Pellet or someone has tried to rescue him. Jeff Lee, Pellet, and other people have tried to rescue Bobby from making another mistake, and let's get things together here." And Vincent was the first one to bail. He said, I don't want to take the chance that Bobby's going to screw something up again after we put a lot of work into something. We're going to walk on stage and he's going to do something, and blow it. And Greg and I would still talk about it, even after Vincent died, because we'd be like, this is what we're basically known for. This is our 15 minutes of fame. Was the 70s Pentagram was the classic four members were Greg, Vincent, Bobby, and Jeff. And we thought we should, just before one of us is gone, one more of us is gone, since Vincent's already gone, let's maybe do a gig or something. But it never came to be, because there's always been a current Pentagram, and they don't really want to give up their momentum when they've got a new album coming out, or they're touring and stuff like that. I understand that there's a sort of there was a little bit of resentment about the 70s Pentagram, and the fact that a lot of the fans like songs like Be Forewarned and Lazy Lady and Show 'Em How and $20 Spin and From My Queen and stuff like that, and they want them to like the new stuff that's on the new album. And that's typical of most musicians. They want them to like the new album, but a lot of people want to hear the 70s stuff. And I just thought it would be nice to just especially when our 50th anniversary came around, which unfortunately was in the middle of COVID. I thought this would be the perfect time. A half a century, Pentagram, a version of Pentagram has been in existence in one form or another with like 40 different members. But it would be awesome to do a 50th anniversary of Pentagram, and let the original members come on stage and play like From My Queen and 2 or 3 songs and stuff. But there was never any offer. There was never any discussion. And I wasn't going to go begging, please let us come on stage and celebrate, whatever. So it never happened, and it's too bad. So,
all right,
there you go.
Well, I'm gonna
probably all the time we have. So I'm sorry it took so long.
No, we have plenty of time, and you jumped ahead a little bit, but that's okay, because we're going to loop back and we'll talk about some of that stuff too. But I did want to go back to the beginning and talk about your influences, like who your favorite drummers were, who influenced your style. And like you said, you guys, a hard rock band, some proto doom elements. I did want to mention, I know that there's a couple of bands here that might have influenced you, some of your favorite albums. I just grabbed a few from my record collection.
I love Cactus. I love Carmine.
Yeah. So I pulled a few out of my Cosmic record collection, like the Cactus Restrictions, and then
that's one of the top 10 albums of all time. One of the top 10 hard rock albums of all time. Not one bad note on it. From that first
Captain Beyond.
I mean,
Bobby Caldwell.
He is one of the most amazing drummers on the Johnny Winter and Live album, and on the Armageddon album, and on the two, unfortunately, not on the through. The bummer about Sufficiently Breathless was he rejoined the band right after the album came out, and they had the other drummer on there who was kind of ordinary and kind of simple and plain. And then he rejoined the band, and it's like, how much better would that album have been if Bobby had been on it? And my fantasy, which will never come true, although Sharon Osbourne did it to the Ozzy Osbourne albums, would be to have Bobby Caldwell re-record the drums on Sufficiently Breathless and reissue that album with just him playing drums.
Well, I'm very fortunate.
More energy those songs have.
Our band actually got to open up for them at the Doomfest here, and we'll talk about that later on. But I feel very blessed that it's just him, but he surrounded himself with amazing players. So yeah, I just wanted to throw a couple of these.
I talked to. Oh yeah, the First Bang, classic album.
And then this last one, you actually already mentioned. This was one of Randy's favorite.
Yeah, I mean, Lord Baltimore. The funny story. I will probably veer off into. This is why editing will be really. You'll be really put to the test for editing, Steve.
We're keeping everything.
Okay. I'd never met. The story of how I met Randy involves Lord Baltimore directly. Randy and Bobby were a year older than me, so they were like a grade ahead of me. And so I knew Bobby. Randy went to a different junior high than I did, but Bobby went to the same one I did. But I always heard about this guy named Randy who was like really into horror films, which I was, and really into like hard rock. And his favorite bands were like Lord Baltimore and Black Sabbath and stuff. But I never met him. And people told me, I heard this from a number of people, that they were afraid, Bobby was afraid that if he introduced me to Randy, that he'd be pushed out of the picture, and Randy and I would just be like hanging around nonstop. And that's kind of what happened. We were like brothers, separated at birth. We were both making our own home horror films on Super 8 movies. We both collected all the horror magazines like Famous Monsters and Vampirella and Creepy and Eerie and all those magazines. We both bought the plastic Aurora models of like, I've got right here. I've got the this is one of my favorite ones. If I can get it without knocking it over, is the guillotine, which is an Aurora model with there's a head in the basket somewhere. But Randy and I both made the models, and like I say, collected the magazines and did all this stuff and watched all the horror movies. And when we met, we started going to every horror movie that came to town. My patient dad would drive us to the drive-in for a 3-movie mega, horror marathon. If there was something downtown, once I got my license or Randy got his, we would go downtown and see it the day it opened. So we both were, both musically and in the horror stuff, we had so much in common, and we both loved pinball. He loved playing pinball. So so Randy and I became really good friends because of bands like that. The Lord Baltimore story is, so as I told you, I would call record labels and I would ask them, when is something coming out? And I called Mercury and I said, there's a new album coming out by the band Lord Baltimore. Do you know when it's coming out? And they said, oh, it's coming out in like, February 20th or whenever it was. And so I called around to a number of stores on the day that they said it was going to come out. And one store out in Maryland, I live in Virginia, but about 20 miles away in Maryland, one store called Empire Music. It was kind of a hippie shop that had like lots of, really rare imports and odd stuff you wouldn't find in like, Walmart or whatever. They said they had gotten a promo in of the second Lord Baltimore album. They didn't have it in stock yet, but they had one copy of a promo. And I said, I want it. I will be there in an hour or two. And they said, okay, I'll put your name on it. And so I put my name on it. I drove out to Maryland. I got it. The second Lord Baltimore album. I can't wait. And this was the perfect reason to call Randy Palmer and introduce myself and say, hey, I got the new Lord Baltimore album. You want to get together and listen to it? So I call him up, and I've never talked to him before in my life, never met him in person. And I said, I got the second Lord Baltimore album. And he said, yeah, I'm getting it too. They're holding it for me out at Empire Music in Maryland. And I said, I just got it at Empire Music in Maryland. It turns out 2 different clerks had taken our two different phone calls, and both of them had put his name and my and he held that for me, jokingly but grudgingly. He always says, "You got my copy of Lord Baltimore," and I said, "It wasn't anyone's copy of Lord Baltimore. I just happened to call first and get there first. I'm sorry, I didn't know." But that's what brought us together was, and he begrudgingly said, "Yeah, bring it over," and so I brought the album over and we listened to the second Lord Baltimore album. But that was what brought us together was us, fighting for who gets the one advanced promo copy that in the DC area of the Lord Baltimore second album was our fighting for it and not knowing we were fighting for it, and I happened to get it first. So there's the how I met Randy story.
Well, that's a perfect segue because there was a bit of cosmic synchronicity that I think I might have reached out to you like when you guys were working on the second Bedemon album, because you had the website going and everything. But about almost 20 years ago now, there was a local store called Joe's Record Paradise, and they sold magazines and records and all kinds of stuff. And I saw this magazine, and I love old horror stuff too. And so I picked it up, and I was like, "Oh, Monsters of Filmland." And I'm flipping through it, and I'm like, "Oh yeah, this is cool." And I do like a double take, because I look in the magazine and where is it? And you're flipping through, and if it's a blink and you'll miss it. I just happened to see it in the corner of my eye, and it says "Growing Up with Famous Monsters of Filmland" right here. I don't know if you can see it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there's a picture of Randy. Yeah, there's a picture of Randy. Yeah.
It says, I look at it, and I was like, I see the two pictures, the before and after, and it says famous monster fan Randy, and I was like, Randy Palmer, because I knew about Randy Palmer. It was the mid 2000s, so I had already, and I love local music. I'm into the local doom scene and all that, so I had already known about Randy Palmer and the legend of Pentagram and all of that, and I knew that he was a horror fan, and I knew that he had written a book about horror, and and I was like, holy shit, it's fucking Randy Palmer. So that was a bit of a mind blower. It's this issue right here. I don't know if you've seen this one before, but
he wrote for a number of issues. He edited and wrote for Vampirella. He was friends with editor Forey Ackerman, who lived in Hollywood. When Randy and I went out to California in 1984, we had this fantasy that we were going to move to California. Now, neither one of us had jobs. I was living off money that my dad would give me. I was the spoiled only child. Randy was working for the phone company or something, and was going to be, working for Forey, maybe writing articles or whatever. So we're going into realtors and stuff, and in like Hollywood and California and stuff, saying, "Yeah, we're interested in looking into renting a house." So what's your income and stuff? Well, I don't really have any income. My dad, pays my bills, and he's going to write for a horror magazine. And they're like, "Okay, we have this house about 50 miles north of here," and we drive out there, and it was like a house where the door was like broken off the hinges and stuff like that. And it was like a real wake-up call that we had this fantasy that we were just going to move to California and like hang out with Forey Ackerman and make music and make horror movies and stuff like that. But we went to the Acker Mansion, as Forey would call it, and he gave us a tour of the basement, showing us Bela Lugosi's Ring, and just stacked ceiling high magazines and horror books and memorabilia and skeletons and everything else. And it was really cool to meet Forey. He took us out to dinner, to a diner, and he made us pay for our own meals. Randy and I worked for, it was a diner. I mean, it was like, $6 for each of our meals. And Forey didn't offer to pay for our meals, even though we'd flown out from Virginia and we're meeting him, and he, takes us out to dinner, but then doesn't pay for our meals. We always found that kind of amusing. But Randy was friends with him, so he did a lot of writing for the various Warren publications. And had a lot of tales to tell about Jim Warren, who was the publisher, and Forey, who was the editor of, Creepy and Eerie and Vampirella and Famous Monsters and Monster World. They had like 5 or 6 publications, and I had every copy, and so did Randy. So like I say, we had so much in common. So, and then we started making horror films together. And Bobby's in a couple of them, because Randy had one that was unfinished that had Bobby in part of it playing a zombie. And Randy's in his bedroom, with just regular shirt on. There's a Lord Baltimore poster up on the wall, and he's got like a surgical thing. He's working on Bobby's face as a zombie, and it's like it couldn't be less, of a doctor's office or whatever. And then Bobby starts to wake up, and we had a smashed grape on his cheek, which looked really gross, and some fake blood and stuff. And Bobby starts to wake up, and Randy runs out of the room, and Bobby just lurches outside, and we put padding in his t-shirt so he looked really big and muscular. But it was just so ridiculous to see a Lord Baltimore poster up behind supposedly a surgeon working on a zombie. But I wound up finishing that film with him. I wind up killing Bobby in the end. I hit him with my car, get out of my car, and then I have a pickaxe in the back, and I take it and I whack it into his chest, and then you see it being pulled out. And of course, it was a fake body, with Bobby's head he was laying next to this fake body. And then we made another movie together, which was great. My dad was actually in it also. Bobby had a part in that. And then we started a third film, which was going to be the best one yet. And we never finished it, but I've got a bunch of outtakes from it that are really, really good. One of the best murders we ever did. And our whole purpose in making these horror films was to gross out our friends. It wasn't because we had some artistic, thing we needed to fulfill in our lives. It was like, what can we do that's really gross looking that our friends will go, oh, how'd you do that? So we had this woman named Martha Hull, who was the singer with a band called the Slicky Boys, who were like a punk band in the DC area. Mm-hmm. They were pretty well known. They had a number of EPs out. They were really cool. And I she was really cool. She's on Facebook. But we had this scene where she goes out into the woods to smoke some pot, and her friend is out there somewhere too, and they're calling for each other. And when she wakes, suddenly she gets turned around and a rock gets thrown at her. Bobby's like smashing the one girl with a rock, a fake, a styrofoam rock, and he turns around and throws it at Martha. And when Martha wakes up, her legs are tied to the bumper of a car, and her arms are tied around a tree, and just see Randy's feet. And Randy gets in, or whoever the murderer is. I shouldn't reveal the plot line because that's not accurate. But you see the foot of the murderer, and he gets into the car, and you see him put it in reverse. And then he suddenly backs up, and her arms and legs get tight. And then suddenly the door opens to the car. He gets out, and she's like on her knees with no arms, writhing there, standing on her knees with blood coming out her shoulders and stuff like that. And she's still not dead yet. And then it shows him like laughing. So this is the type of movies that Randy and I were making. It was like, what can we do that like tops our last film that is so gruesome and stuff, and you had so much fun to make, and we had so much fun making these movies. I mean, it was fun, like coming up, how creative can we be with a low budget, way before CGI or anything like that. We're buying stuff at the grocery store, like raw hamburger and stuff like that to use for gross stuff. And I feel sorry for the actors and actresses that had to go through this, but they did it, and so there you go. But that's the fun.
That stuff have to see the light of day sometime.
It's something I've talked to Pellet about for decades, that I would love to put these out officially, and maybe me do like an overdubbed vocal explaining like what this scene was, and this unfinished film, what this was going to be, and stuff like that. Like I have an on again, off again audio track you could turn on and listen to my description, because otherwise the movies are silent. Although I did use my Casio keyboard and make some really scary when I transferred them from VHS to DVD-Rs. I put in some really cheesy Casio scary music, but I'd love to release them someday. I don't know how the people who were in them would feel about them being released, 50 years later, but they might not never know.
Oh, you could turn one of them into maybe, like a Pentagram video or something like that.
No, it'd be a compilation of all of them. Just put them all in one DVD, the Randy and Jeff horror films. Here's all the stars that are in them, and here's the 3 movies that are on this DVD and stuff. So,
well, I mean, I was just
one
saying,
of these things I'd like to do.
Yeah, as for fun, you could just take shots of one and maybe make a pentagram, like a video of some of the old footage. I'm just throwing that out there, but yeah, that sounds awesome. It would be cool for that to see the light of day. But yeah, I didn't really get
I was going to say, the one sad thing you just mentioned is we were about 5 years too early for video, for VHS, for camcorders and stuff. There is not one single movie frame of Pentagram, of the 70s Pentagram, playing silently or with music or anything. And like in the 80s, camcorders came out. Even if you couldn't afford to buy them, you could rent them from the video stores and stuff when VHS tapes came out and beta tapes came out. And if we'd been around for another 5 or 6 years, we could have videotaped our rehearsals. We could have videotaped some gigs. But there is literally not one frame of movie or video of the 70s Pentagram. There's just stills. There's just, our photographer, Cameron Davidson, who was a friend of mine since 8th grade. I've known him longer than probably anyone else in life. We're still friends to this day, talk like once a week. He took every picture pretty much of Pentagram that's on every cover of all the First Days Here albums and stuff like that. Yeah, so there's a lot of stills, but there's not a single inch of video or movie. So.
going back to I guess we didn't get to answer your question about like the drummers that influenced you, and like, what was the spark that made you want to pursue, music? Because even back then, I'm sure everyone knew it was probably a long shot. It was a real dream. So like, what drummers inspired you, and what was the real spark?
Well, my musical history is that in 1960 to 62, roughly, my parents and I lived in Bangkok, Thailand. My dad worked for a company. He was in the Navy for 30 years, and one of his ex-Navy friends, when they'd retired, started a company called Satellite Associates, and they had a location in Indiana, where we had moved from Arlington, Virginia. We moved to Indiana, Michigan City, Indiana, and there was another American family that lived in Bangkok, Thailand, and the owner of the company said, would you be willing to go to Bangkok, Thailand for 2 years, and they'll come and live in your house and you'll live in their house? So we went to Bangkok, Thailand for 2 years. And, I'm 5, 6, 7 years old. I mean, we could have been in Trenton, New Jersey for all I knew. It's like I was too young to appreciate how exotic and cool it was to be in Bangkok, Thailand. But my parents had me taking ukulele lessons briefly. And I will never to this day know if they were expecting me to be the new Don Ho. I don't know what exactly purpose ukulele lessons were going to serve. I've never played the
That's
ukulele.
funny.
When I got back to Virginia, I got back to Indiana. I started playing acoustic guitar. And it was cheap old acoustic guitar with a hole in and stuff. And I would like play along with Beatles records and stuff like that for my neighbors. And that was what I picked up first, was guitar. And then on my 15th birthday, now living in Arlington, Virginia, my parents bought me the guitar I've had ever since, my Gibson Melody Maker, the red Gibson Melody Maker that's seen in some pictures and stuff. That's still the only guitar I've ever written songs on. I've had the guitar, they bought it used, so it's probably from 1960 or so. And the Sears Silvertone Twin 12 amplifier, which I still have in my bedroom. So I started playing guitar first, and I really enjoyed that. But then I started getting the urge to play drums, and so what I did was I bought Kentucky Fried Chicken buckets with the lids on them, and my dad would take me to the hardware store, and we get these sticks you'd put like to hold plants up and stuff, and he'd cut them into like foot-long lengths, and I would drum along on a Kentucky Fried Chicken tub to like the Dave Clark Five, the Rolling Stones, Paul Revere and the Raiders, the Beatles, things like that. And so then I took interest in drums, and then we went to Sears and bought a Remco toy drum kit for like $38, which was just plastic and real flimsy, and the cymbals sounded like pie plates and stuff. And then eventually I started buying through classifieds. I'd buy a real tom-tom, and then a different colored real floor tom, and a real bass drum. And I started playing drums at the warehouse where my dad was an executive. So I was playing both guitar. I've been playing guitar longer, but I've been playing guitar and drums for 50 years, 55 years. As far as my influences go, specifically on drumming, I mean, I love. I'm not as good as these guys, but I love Carmen Appice. Vanilla Fudge, I think, was the 4th concert I saw at a theater in the Round called Shady Grove Music Fair in Gaithersburg, Maryland. And I just loved Carmine because he would do these, awesome, just amazing drum rolls, where he would like, crash a cymbal and dead it right away. Like, he was just so fancy and controlling the sticks and everything else. I really liked Corky Lang of Mountain because he was just so frantic looking. He would play, play stuff like, Never Coming Back and stuff like
Caveman.
that. He was just wild. I mean, he wasn't like the fanciest of drummers, but he was so wild, and he was just savage. I really like Cozy Powell. I really like John Bonham, because John Bonham was like the king of the stomp, and I like the fact that he played one bass drum. I've toyed around with double bass drums occasionally, but I just always go back to one bass drum. Because I'm not a speed metal drummer, and I've never liked. I kind of lost interest in heavy metal when bands like Slayer and Anthrax and stuff like that came out. Not that they were bad, but just wasn't my taste. and the drummers were always like, it's like, I want to boom, boom, bop, boom, boom, bop. I want to hear that solid single bass drum. So I really like John Bonham for that reason. And so those, and Bobby Caldwell, you can't, he just did stuff no one else was doing. Like I say, that first album from start to finish, there's not one bad song or bad note on it I would take off. So yeah, those are, and I like some other drummers who are not really my style, but I think they're amazing. Simon Phillips is absolutely incredible. I mean, I've seen him in like small clubs down in LA, and watching Simon Phillips play something that's like in 17/9 time, where he these amazing rolls and manages to come out of them. Yeah, there's some drummers like him that I really admire just because they are just so amazing. But as far as my own styles, the ones I mentioned are the ones that really kind of influenced me.
Right,
and
cool.
Paul Whaley, Blue Cheer.
Of course, can't forget about Paul Whaley.
Because he'd do stuff like Dr. Please and Second Time Around, which would go on, live. They would go on for like 10 minutes and he's just going. It's like, that's where I kind of, a lot of the Pentagram songs that we do live, like Target and Die in Your Sleep, and Show Them How. Greg and I would basically just like, he'd stay on one note and I'd be like, we're just singing Blue Cheer rhythm section, so let Vincent go nuts, and as we'll just stick here on one note, one beat. And that was the Paul Whaley style. So I actually used to cut the tips of my drumsticks off because I would break them so often. So they would just be rounded off. My dad would sand them off. I'd buy real drumsticks. We'd cut off the tips and just sand them off because I was breaking the tips off so often. I was hitting the drums so hard. But one of our managers says, yeah, but you need more subtlety for like the cymbals and stuff. You need to have that tip on there to hit the bell and stuff like that. And he talked me back into getting just some heavier sticks that wouldn't break so easy. So I compromised. So I'm not against compromise.
Right. Well, yeah, we talked about the movie a little bit, but I wanted to ask you, how much of you're in it a little bit. So, did you want to talk about your experience with the movie? And supposedly there's hours of footage. I don't know if you talked to Pellet about maybe there being a follow-up or anything like that. So
yes and no.
Okay.
That's actually the second movie I'm in. The one before that was Such Hawks, Such Hounds, which was a documentary about American stoner rock. And there's the first third of it has interviews with me and stuff, and Wino and other people, and Wino talking about Pentagram, and they interviewed me for that as well. But that was the Pentagram movie that, people like Howard Stern and Ozzy Osbourne were talking about that on the air, about that movie. A lot of people saw that movie about, that messed up singer and stuff. I'd go into a grocery store and the clerk would say, did I see you on Showtime the other night? And I said, yeah, you probably saw the movie that I'm in, or I'm interviewed about, the band that I co-founded, that they had the singer with all the problems that kept shooting himself in the foot every time we get close to getting a record deal. There is supposedly a ton of footage that they shot. A lot of it Bobby with his parents. They came out here to my house, and in the movie you see Pellet driving up Highway 101 and passing the San Miguel Mission, which is right the exit right before mine. And he's like, I'm going to meet Geof O'Keefe, and then he drives to the driveway, and that was literally the first time we met. That wasn't staged. It was like, he walked up my driveway and I walked, down, and we met, and so we talked on the phone for years, but that was the first time we actually physically met in person. I just gave him a tour of the house and showed him some Pentagram memorabilia and some things that'll never come out, like a solo album I recorded when I was 15 on reel-to-reel tape, and a comedy project that Bobby and I did that was based on the Fugs. I don't know if you remember the New York band, the Fugs, who had a lot of filthy songs, songs. Bobby and I put together this little project called The Douchebags, high on her mountains, deep in her valley. And it was just us doing like really filthy acoustic songs and covers of songs like If I Were a Carpenter, but with all filthy lyrics. And it's just me and Bobby playing all these songs, and I've got a cover for it. I cut pictures out of Playboy and glued them on the front cover and stuff. So there's like one copy of this douchebags thing. There's one copy of my solo album, Looking Back, and then I've got a bunch of rehearsal tapes of Pentagram that haven't been used for First Days Here albums. I've got a couple of live concerts of us playing at the Keg in 1976. So there's still, I've got a pile of this many Pentagram tapes that have not come out, but it's a matter of whether a label wants to bake them, because they're 45 years old now at this point. And I'd be scared to play them because they'd just be oxide, would just be dropping off probably if you put it on a regular reel-to-reel player. So they need to be baked, and then they need to be gone through and seen what the best version of which song is and stuff. So what was the question? If you look at my cell phone, I'll just see if I can bring it up something here that isn't obscene. But when I write a message to someone, when I write a message to someone, this is basically what they often look like. And I'm known for not knowing what the word succinct means, but they're always like long messages, and they're really long messages. And this is what my emails were like. And this is what my phone calls were like. It's like, I can't say in 3 words what I can say in 300.
Sure.
When I used to write for Goldmine magazine, I used to do reviews and I do articles. My first article was a Blue Cheer article. It was a massively long Blue Cheer article, an interview with Dickie Peterson when they played at the
Awesome.
at the 930 Club in DC for the Beast Is Back album. And I went backstage and got to interview him for Goldmine magazine. And it was a history of the band, a separate interview with him, a question and answer interview. And I also had the Steve Allen performance, which is like the holy grail of video that I can't find anywhere. No one seems to have this, where Blue Cheer played on Steve Allen's afternoon show with, the nice, matronly women in suits and stuff. And Blue Cheer played live. And they did Summertime Blues, and then Steve Allen interviewed them and made a lot of jokes about, Blue Cheer, they're stronger than dirt. And then they did Out of Focus. And they played live on the Steve Allen show, no lip syncing, and with the Marshall Stacks and stuff. And it was with Lee Stevens. It wasn't Randy Holden or anyone else. And no one has that video. I have it on audio, and it's been bootlegged on audio of the interview and the performances. But supposedly Steve Allen, a lot of his library burned in a fire. And it's like, that's like the one holy grail would be to find that one live performance. Because as far as I know, there is no live performance of the original Blue Cheer. There's some beat club stuff from Germany where they're lip syncing, but there's no, and they're on American Bandstand where Dick Clark talks to some innocent looking kids in the audience saying, you see all those amps up there, they're going to be loud, and then they lip sync Summertime Blues, But the Steve Allen show was them live, and it's like, I want those two performances, but it's like no one has them. No one seems to have ever, it's just a little bit, again, like us not having video of Pentagram. The Steve Allen show was just a little bit too early in 1968 for people to have VCRs and stuff that it could have recorded it. So if anyone out there has the video of Blue Cheer on Steve Allen, put it up on YouTube. A lot of people would love to see it. So anyway. What was the question? Oh yeah, nothing short. Goldmine. I was going to tell you, Goldmine. I used to write tons of reviews for Goldmine, and the editor at the time, I believe it was Jeff Tamarkin, who later went on to work for RCA and writing the Jefferson Airplane liner notes and stuff. He said my reviews always came in way over the word limit, but he said they were so well written, he ran them as they were, because I would give a history of the band that I was reviewing, and then I would give a detailed description. And it's like, I can't stand a review that reviews a reissue of an album with bonus tracks and stuff. And it says nothing at all about the sound quality. It says nothing at all about how good the bonus tracks are. It doesn't tell you anything. It's basically just a review of the original album that the guy could have written a month before he even got a copy of the reissue. And the British magazines are notorious for this, like Classic Rock and Record Collector, where I would read a review and I'd go, this doesn't tell me anything. It's just a basic history of the band, and it says nothing about this particular reissue and whether it's worth rebuying it again. How are the bonus tracks? I always like to write, here's what the tracks sound like, and this is way better quality than the previous version. And here's, the bonus tracks are really cool. And this, this thing is unreleased, demos and stuff. So he said, even though my writing was way over length, he said he runs them as is because they were well written. I hate writing. If you look at the Pentagram liner notes, which are like 24 pages long, Relapse wasn't thrilled about that. But it's like I wanted to tell the history of the band, and I wanted to have song by song credits, and descriptions of each song as to how the song came together and stuff like that. And they let me go with it. And a lot of the reviews said, the very detailed liner notes by Geof O'Keefe, talk about the album and everything. Because to me, information is good. I don't want to be left wondering who played on that song, who wrote that song. I want to know. So this gets into a whole different subject as to why I hate downloads and love CDs, because I want musician credits, the songwriter credits, the recording info, the lyrics and stuff. I don't want just a cover and music on my computer. I want this. I want to hold the CD and look at it and look at, oh, I played lead on that song, So it's like, I'm all over the place. And I used to do a radio show for 6 years, and I would listen to my radio show and I would say, you talk way too fast. You have so many thoughts in your mind. You talk way too fast. You need to talk slower. Just pretend you're in a slowed down version of yourself and talk slower. But it's really hard for me to do that. So
you're a rock and roll disciple,
and...
man. Yeah, you're a rock and roll disciple. That's the kind of term that I came up with in Brotherhood of Orpheus. Are people that they love to learn. It doesn't not necessarily about music or just about anything. They want to know, and it's it's kind of an empowering, but it also you feel more connected with the music and the artists and everything, and so that's really important.
Well, but yeah, being a musician myself, I want to know who played what. I want to know what guys in the band wrote the song, or was it a cover song? I mean, I want to know this stuff, and you don't get that on a download. If you're lucky, you'll get the front cover art, and that's it. And you can maybe go online and search for it. But if you're if you're out listening to it in your car or whatever else, if you can find a car that still has CD players, because from what I hear, new cars don't even have CD players anymore. I'm like, no, I have 10,000 CDs. I want a CD player. I'll have to get one and put it in aftermarket. But it's like, if I'm in a grocery store parking lot listening to a song and I hear a great guitar solo, I want to look in the booklet and see who's playing that solo. I don't want to have to go home, get online, look up that album, look up the credits. And it's like, no, screw that. Put it in the booklet, sell it for $15. I'll buy it, and if people want downloads, they can buy them. But don't take the CDs away, put it on vinyl, put it on download, put it on CD, give us the option, charge whatever it costs you. It's $15, $18, $20. A lot of us will still buy CDs and vinyl. So anyway, but it's easier for the record companies because they don't have to press CDs. They don't have to deal with artwork. They don't have to deal with defects. They don't have to deal with shipping. They don't have to deal with any of that stuff. They can just put the stuff in the computer and rake in the money, and that's my cynical view of why downloads have become so popular, because record companies have really pushed artists to, do them as downloads. That's what the kids all like these days. Well, I'm not a kid. And I grew up listening to record albums, with nice covers and inner sleeves, and then CDs with nice booklets. And it's like, the whole concept of artists that are putting out new albums only as a download drives me nuts. And I write to the artists on Facebook and I'll say, can't you press up like 500 CDs and charge, $19.95 for it? Because a lot of those, CDs don't sell anymore. I said, well, why is it when I go to Bandcamp and I look up like 10 different artists that I've been told I like, it says CD sold out, CD sold out. I mean, people are obviously still buying CDs. And I see numerous threads where people say, downloads suck, give us a physical product. But, again, load the music into the computer, no work, no artwork, no shipping, no defects, rake in the money. And that's people have bought into it. So all I can do is fight for.
Is it interesting you mentioned
Go
CDs
ahead.
because there was the big vinyl revival, but maybe I'm a bit like you. I'm a CD guy. I prefer to get CDs. Like, what's your preferred form, whether it's vinyl, CD, or cassette?
I wrote a letter. There was a magazine called Ice, which was put out by a guy named Pete Howard, which was basically kind of like an industry magazine where it was like 20 pages, and it would list like new releases coming out in the next 2 months. It had I had a page for a CD watchdog where there was a defect on the CD. You could write in, and he would contact the record label and say, this song skips, or these two songs are blended together and this should have a separation and stuff. And they would get back to him and say they can send in the defective copy. We'll send them a replacement and stuff. And they also would print letters from the fans. And I said, CDs are my preference, not just because I like the sound of them, but I don't miss the sound of me getting into my car, closing the door, and driving back to the record store because the record is off center, is warped, has a skip in it, has pops and clicks during the quiet parts. I said, I don't miss those sounds at all. I like hearing just the music. And on the CD, I hear just the music. This argument about CDs or, LPs are warmer than CDs. Well, I have tone controls on my, 7-speaker surround system in my living room. I can make it warmer sounding by turning the bass up, turning the treble down to, mid-range, putting the subwoofer on a little loud. I can adjust the sound. I can make it sound warmer, but I don't miss having, to get up and change the album and flip it over after 18 minutes and don't scratch it or drop it and everything else. So it's like CDs, I can have a stack of CDs like this, and I got, boxes and boxes of them compared to albums, which are like, bulky and everything else. But I do miss the artwork. I love the artwork of record albums, seeing it in big format. And for a brief time, there was a couple labels that were going to put out CDs in album-sized covers with a CD in the middle pressed on like one of those little plastic, nubs. Yeah, there you go. But they were going to put out CDs in album-sized covers, so you could still get the artwork, but the CD would be pressed in a little plastic nub in the middle, and it would have a booklet and stuff. And that was a kind of a cool idea, but it never really took off. I have a funny Captain Beyond story for you. I have a million stories, but I'll only tell you 999,000 of them.
I want to hear them all, man.
So I used to be in contact with a guy named Rick Gagnon, who ran the Iron Butterfly fan club. And he put out a newsletter of Iron Butterfly News. And this was back in the 70s, I guess, late 60s, early 70s. And I was in Virginia and he was in California. And I told him that I had seen a listing that in Japan, the first 2 Captain Beyond albums were coming out for the first time ever on CD on Polydor in Japan. And he told this to Rhino, and Rhino called me. Rhino called me on the phone and says, hey man, I got your number from Rick. He said the first 2 Captain Beyond albums are coming out on CD. And I said, yeah, I just ordered them from CD Japan. I said, that's a place I always buy from. And he said, I haven't heard anything about this. I'd like to find out about this because, royalties and stuff. But he said, I've heard nothing about these. And so I said, yeah, I feel bad for you, but I'm very happy they're coming out. So that was my one conversation with Rhino on the phone was me telling him about the Captain Beyond albums coming out on CD in Japan before they came out anywhere else, and he knew nothing about it. So
Rhino's the guitar player for the viewers out there that might not know.
Larry Reinhardt. Larry Reinhardt was better known as Rhino, and he came from Iron Butterfly from their one Metamorphosis album. Had Mike Pinera on it. And went after Eric Braun left the band. Mike Pinera and Larry Reinhardt came in as the 2 guitarists and did Metamorphosis. So
we're talking about covers, so I have to show this one again because this is one of the all-time classics. So and it's Shocktober and Friday the 13th, so I had to show it again.
You can show any of the Black Sabbath covers. They all have their good points and some have bad points, but most of them are really cool. So yeah.
Were there any particular? I was going to say, were there any particular artists that you were a fan of in terms of album artwork?
Artwork. It's like I wasn't a fan of artwork in terms of like a fan of a particular artist or a particular band's art. I either liked the cover or I didn't. I thought Roger Dean's covers were amazing. I thought the Hypnosis album covers were amazing because they were so bizarre and unexpected. You never knew what Hypnosis, the British company, was going to do with their next album cover, because they would be like, eggs floating on an ocean or something, like, just something bizarre like that.
Sure.
And it had nothing to do with the next album they worked on for some other band. So I really liked Hypnosis's covers. And Roger Dean were probably two of my favorite. Roger Dean's art is still amazing, and totally unique. So,
well, I want to go back to the 70s and talk about Skip Groff. I mean, he was, just for the viewers out there, he's a bit of a legend, local like music legend. He was involved into the rock scene, but also the punk scene. He had a record store called Y&T. And he passed away a few years ago. I actually went to that memorial. Ian MacKaye and Henry Rollins were both there. There were a bunch of the guys from the Slicky Boys were there. And I know that he was involved with Pentagram recording you guys back in the 70s. And when I went to the memorial, they had a few displays, and there was a fanzine there called Graffitis. And I was looking at it, and I was like, holy shit! That's Geof O'Keefe from Pentagram, and you're like writing reviews about like Cactus and Sir Lord Baltimore and Captain Beyond and Black Sabbath, and I recently have been in Kelly, his wife. I've been in contact with her because she has a bunch of these Graffitis, and I wasn't sure if you had any or not, but I just wanted
multiple copies of all of them. I'm a collector, and my house.
If you got extras, my friend, I'm open. I'm all ears.
My house is like Hoarder's Light, the music edition. It's just like I'm in my office now, and it's like I can barely turn around. It's like it is so in need of decluttering. And I blame my dad for this because he always taught me, don't throw anything out. You might need it someday. So save those phone bills, save those bank statements, save those, receipts from your credit cards and stuff. So I've got like phone bills from 10 years ago sitting in boxes that I've never once had to look for, and I never would have to. And I could always call the phone company if I ever had a problem. And it's just hard to let go of stuff like that when your dad instilled in you might need this. And he kept everything, and he kept it really nicely organized in a file cabinet. My stuff is just in boxes and piles in no order at all. I mean, I could reach over here and pull out a receipt from my trash company pickup from 2014. It's like, I don't need it, throw it away. I get it intellectually, but it's hard when you start doing it yourself, and it's like, well, this looks important, and Dad said don't throw it out. So it's the same way with music. I would always get multiples of things, and graffiti. Yeah, Skip I met through there was a guy named Al Ercolani who worked at a record shop in Washington, D.C. on Wisconsin Avenue, a little up from Georgetown, called Viscount Records, spelled Viscount, Viscount Records. And Al said, you should meet this guy named Skip. He's the music director at WINX Radio out in Rockville, Maryland. And he collects records, like the stuff the station doesn't keep, that they would normally throw away or give to fans, whatever. He takes it home. He's got like closets and closets full of like promo singles and stuff like that. And because you collect stuff like that, picture sleeves and non-LP tracks and stuff, you should meet him. So I wound up meeting Skip, and we became like big brother, little brother, kind of like Randy and I were like, the brothers that never met, or the whatever.
Is this like 73, 74 time frame?
It was a little before that, because this was before Pentagram. He was our second Pentagram manager. Him and the guy named Tom, whose name I'm forgetting the last name of, but Skip. Yeah. So I used to go out to his house, and occasionally Bobby would go along, and we would just look through these boxes and boxes and boxes of promo singles that Skip would like pull off of shelves and stuff that he had in closets, and he would sell them to us. So we would buy them. The funniest story about this is one single in particular that Bobby and I would always laugh about. To this day, he would probably remember the story. We found a Lee Stevens single, a solo single, after he left Blue Cheer, called Saki. Saki is Wadu, like Sakizwado, Saki is Wadu. And it wasn't on the Red Weather album. And the B-side was, but the A-side wasn't. And Bobby and I were like, oh man, I'll give you $9 for this. And I'm like, I'll give you $10 for this. And it's like, and stuff like. Then we played it. It was awful. It was a horrible track. It was like a tropical song, like with the bongos and stuff like that. And suddenly it was like, I'll give you $1 for it. I'll give you $1.50 for it. But the price just plummeted when we heard how bad the song was. But I still wanted it because it was a non-LP track. So over my singles rack behind me over there, I have the copy of Saki's Wadu by Lee Stevens that I got from Skip. But yeah, Skip started, he introduced me to movies and music and stuff, and I worked in a number of his stores before he opened Yesterday and Today, which was also known as Y&T. He had a couple of other stores that he would rent a room from. There was a comic book shop that a guy named Mark Feldman had in Silver Spring, Maryland, and Skip rented a room from him and sold records in there. And I would go in and I would be the clerk for the day. I would go in and just man the shop, and people would come in and look at the small piles of promo records and albums and singles and stuff, and I would be the clerk. So I worked in a couple of Skip stores before Yesterday and Today. I never worked at Yesterday and Today. By then I had moved on to Variety Records in Georgetown. And not the Variety Records, Record and Tape Limited, which later became Olson's Books and Records. I worked for them in Georgetown and also in Old Town, Alexandria, as the import buyer. But Skip became one of my best friends. I mean, he taught me so much about the music business, and he wanted to manage Pentagram. So him and this friend Tom, he had a lot of contacts in the business, and they took us into the studio, and he's the one who recorded Forever My Queen, 20 Buck Spin, Walk in the Blue Light, Hurricane, Earth Flight, Under My Thumb. Yeah. Those tracks were all recorded. He was the producer and the guy behind this. The very first single, which was when we were briefly known as Macabre, was a different manager. But the classic early stuff. Yeah. Actually, those were different managers on that album. That was Gordon Fletcher and Steve Lorber. Gordon Fletcher used to write for Rolling Stone and Cream and Circus and all these magazines, and he knew everyone in the business. He knew Paul Stanley and Gene Simmons. He's the one who got them to come see us rehearse in a house in Annandale, Virginia, in the basement. He knew Murray Krugman and Sandy Pearlman, who were the producers.
Well, we're actually going to get to those stories in a couple of minutes.
Okay. but Gordon, my point was Gordon knew all of them, and he came after.
That's coming right after the Skip question.
Yeah, Skip tried his damnedest to get a record deal for us, and all the record labels said, we don't hear anything commercial. We don't hear catchy choruses or whatever the songs. Because the one thing I will say about Bobby, there've been stories and stuff about Bobby and me not communicating and stuff, and it's like, regardless of anything bad I could say about Bobby or things I've heard about Bobby that he's done or whatever, he wrote some of the most amazing hard rock songs because they didn't have any formula. They didn't have verse, chorus, bridge, solo, verse, chorus. They would have a part, and then they'd have another part, and then I'm going to a lead solo, and then it would change beat, and then it'd be an end part with a long lead solo. And it's like, he reminds me of Sean Bonnewell from the Music Machine, Arthur Lee from Love, and Syd Barrett from Pink Floyd. In that,
wow,
about 3 years, they wrote amazing songs, and they just kind of dried up. And so Bobby wrote hardly anything. I don't think he wrote hardly anything on the 80s, 90s, and 2000s albums. He might have written some lyrics, I've heard, but he didn't sit down with a guitar and come up with a complete, full, start to finish song like he did back in the late 60s, early 70s, when he had I've got a list of all the songs we did, and there's 80 songs that we were rehearsing. And wow. A majority of them were Bobby's, some were co-writes, some were mine by myself. One was co-written with Bobby and Greg, and Star Lady was mostly Randy and Bobby. But Bobby wrote amazing songs for that period of time, and I will always praise Bobby's songwriting for the stuff he contributed back then. I wish he was still writing stuff like that to this day, but instead he's out there just playing it. He's playing for My Queen, but he's not writing anything new like for My Queen. So,
well, did you want to elaborate on the your version of the Kiss story and elaborate on the whole the Sandy Pearlman it's gotten quite legendary. So elaborate on both of those stories if you can.
I wonder where the legends came from. I wonder who started spreading these legends. I
wonder.
I wonder who did interviews and told these legends about, Elektra Records wanted to sign Pentagram, and Casablanca came down to sign Angel or Pentagram. No. So the Kiss story, Gene and Paul, this is right when Kiss Alive had just come out or was just about to come out. Rock and Roll All Night had not become a hit yet. Kiss was not a stadium filler yet. They were still playing in like medium-sized, Lisner Auditorium at George Washington University and places like that. But he knew they were going to be in town. He said, "I'm managing a band. Why don't you come see and check out this band I'm managing?" So in this suburban Annandale, Virginia, a circular little side street, a limousine pulls up, and it's Gene and Paul. No makeup, of course, in the afternoon. The problem was guitarist Vincent and bass player Greg were working as janitors at the time, and they didn't have a car. They hitchhiked to work, and they hitchhiked home, and they were wearing one-piece green janitor outfits. And they were late this day. They couldn't get a ride. So Gene and Paul and me and Bobby and our managers are sitting in the basement with our equipment all set up and no guitarist and no bass player.
Oh,
and
wow.
Gene and Paul are starting to tap their shoes, and it's like, we'd like to get back, and we have a sound check to do and dinner to get and stuff like that. And finally, Vincent and Greg arrive. We had no time to warm up. We obviously were nervous, laying in front of Gene and Paul. And they looked like crap in their janitor's outfits. And we just sort of blew it, and we had no stage show. And Gordon went in the limousine with them afterwards and told me that they were saying, "Gordon, do you really think that this is like a band with any national potential? The lead singer has terrible skin. The guitarist just stands there, doesn't move around at all. The bass player also has terrible skin and it doesn't really look like a rock star type guy, and the drummer's overweight." And he said, "Do you really think this is, But he wasn't seeing us, at our best. He wasn't seeing us live in a club or anything else, like where Bobby was being Bobby and I was playing really cool and Vincent was doing incredible leads. He was seeing us nervous and running late and having already annoyed them to begin with. So the story that Kiss wanted to buy 2 of our songs for $10,000, that's the one that always cracks me up, because when I would talk to Vincent and Greg, and especially Randy, who wrote 90% of Star Lady, which is one of the 2 songs they supposedly wanted to buy, and put their names on it as having written them songs, take our names off, but give us $10,000. And every person I talked to said, "We never had any discussion about this with the managers or anyone." No one ever pulled us aside, after Kiss left or in weeks to come and said, "Kiss wants to buy 2 of your songs." None of us ever heard this at all. And you would think if Randy, who wrote most of Star Lady, would be the one person they would talk to and say, "Well, they want to buy Star Lady. They'll give you $10,000 for it if you just don't mind that your name will be taken off." Randy said, "They never talked to me about that. There was never any discussion about that." So the whole Kiss wants to buy our songs thing, which I see in Wikipedia and all over the internet, and every article about Pentagram online and magazines always mention, and Kiss wanted to buy 2 of their songs. No, they didn't. At least if they did, they never told them. The managers never told us. They never gave us the offer. And they never told the songwriters, Bobby and Randy, that, you want to sell 2 of your songs for $10,000. You'd think that would have gotten back to us at some point if that was a true offer. So as far as I'm concerned, that is a total BS story that Kiss wanted to buy our songs for $10,000 and take credit for them. So that was the Kiss story, and it was just a total disaster. the Sandy Perlman, Murray Krugman story. Again, Gordon knew them. He knew them from they were producing and managing Blue Oyster Cult, The Dictators, Pavlov's Dog. They were working for CBS, but they were also managing those bands and producing their records. They came down to see us when we were practicing in a unused 7-Eleven that we were renting, because my dad had moved on from the warehouse and was working at a different location, so we didn't have the warehouse to practice in anymore. So we're practicing in a 7-Eleven that was unused, and it could be locked up. So they came down to see us, and they liked us, and they said, we'll pay to take a train up to CBS studios in New York, where Miles Davis and Bob Dylan and all these people, legendary CBS studios, and we'll do like a 3-track demo, and then we'll see what we can do. So we take a train up to New York. We had a night off before we went to the studio, and then the next day we went into the studio. The band recorded 3 backing tracks. As I recall, the songs were 20 Buck Spin, When the Screams Come, which we'd already recorded like twice, and Wheel of Fortune, which was a song Bobby and I co-wrote. So we did these 3 songs, the music, and then we all went into the the engineering room with Murray. Sandy wasn't there, but Murray was there, and he was managing the thing. And he had his feet up on the mixing board. And he was reading the sports page and stuff. And he was saying, "Yeah, add a little bass there, do this, whatever." So now Bobby is out in the studio. This Bobby with a microphone, and he sings. I don't remember which song it was, but after it's done, Murray goes, "Yeah, that's good. Come in, let's give it a listen." And Bobby goes, I'd really like to do another take of that. I think I can do a better take of that song." And Murray goes, "No, don't worry about it. We can fix it. If there's any problem, we can fix it in post-production. Just come on in and let's do it." And Bobby goes, "No, I just really would like to just give my best performance of that song." And Murray goes, "Bobby, don't worry about it. We'll fix it in post." So Bobby goes to Gordon, our manager. "Gordon, could you come out here for a second?" So Gordon goes out into the studio with the mic on and says, "Murray's really fucking up our session, man. He's not letting me do my best performance." Murray got up, didn't say a word to anyone, and walked down the stairway. Didn't say a word to the band. And that was the last we heard. And Gordon later told us that CBS was already tentatively working on a contract for us and everything else. And that was the classic example of Bobby shooting himself and all of us in the foot. I mean, it's like what he did to Internal Void. Internal Void records this whole album with him, and on the night of the album premiere, Bobby collapses and then somehow blamed Internal Void for it. I heard at some point, it's like, what did they do? All they did was play on the album, and then you fell over and were on something that night, and had to get rushed to the hospital and all this stuff. Mm-hmm. So it's like, it's that was the closest we got, was being in Columbia Record Studios. Now, the ironic thing is, I wonder if I have this here. I know I have it, but it might be in a pile, in which case I won't bother. Apparently, a company called The Orchard is a part of Columbia Records, or CBS now. Because I used to get my royalty checks for the First Days Here albums from Relapse Records. Now they come from The Orchard. The Orchard is owned by CBS. So the irony is, I didn't get signed to Columbia Records. Pentagram didn't get signed to Columbia Records, but now my royalty checks are coming from Columbia Records for the 2 albums, for the First Days Here and First Days Here 2 albums. So now I'm getting royalty checks from Columbia, but I couldn't get signed by them. So,
right. So I always wondered about that story, whether it's so that one is true. I heard that bit of it, but yeah, it's good to hear your side of the story as well. That's really unfortunate.
The band tried to put a spin on it that Murray was too short-tempered, and he should have understood we were like, we were green, and we hadn't been in the studio before, and we were nervous and stuff, and he should have just been a little more patient. And maybe that's true to an extent, but he's in the Last Days Here movie, and he talks about it. And he, it's a part that I can never watch without crying. I can't really talk about it now without crying. I think I have shades on. But when he says, you always wonder if Bobby hadn't pulled his hissy fit, there but for the grace of God go I, who knows where Pentagram might have gone, if they might have, gotten signed to Columbia and maybe been put on the road opening for Blue Oyster Cult that, Krugman and Perlman, owned, produced and managed, or Pavlov's Dog, or the Dictators,
Wow.
or whatever. And
What if?
Or we might have done one album and it might have done nothing, and we might have been a one album wonder, and we'd be sitting here working at Walmart or something. Instead, here in 2023, I'm doing an interview with you about music I made 53 years ago. So go figure. Is this better than that would have been? We'll never know.
Yes. So let me ask you there, because you did mention it earlier. Is there, because you had the first days here 1 and 2, is there any material left? You did mention some live material that I'm sure people would be very excited to hear, including me. Because I haven't had a chance to mention this, but you're a huge inspiration to a lot of the people in the local doom scene, the heavy rock scene, and a personal influence, inspiration to all of us in my band and me as well. So I just wanted to express that. We didn't really get a chance to talk about that. So, I mean, it would be really amazing to hear if there's anything left, or if there's a live album like floating around.
Thank you for the compliments. First off, it blows me away when I occasionally will get a random email from someone saying, "I love the drums and Walk in the Blue Light." Just some random fan who just sees the Bedemon website or on the Facebook pages for Geof O'Keefe Music or Bedemon, which are both open to the public. They're not private pages. And they send me a message just saying, "I really love the drums in this song. And, are you going to do another Bedemon album? Is there going to, whatever." There's no more studio stuff that is in existence, except there's one version of Earth Flight that was the B-side of Hurricane. That version has never come out on any CD. We re-recorded it at National Sound when we had Randy Palmer in the band briefly. Randy was in the band in 1974 twice. He joined the band, then he quit. He joined the band again, then he quit. But he wound up being on the National Sound recordings, and he's also on the Under My Thumb single. And so we re-recorded Earth Flight, and it was much more energetic. It was much more powerful. So the original version of Earth Flight, B-side of Hurricane, has never been on any CD. And also, when we did the Underground Sound recordings, which were our last studio recordings in 1976, we had another guitarist named Marty Iverson who played with us. And he was more like a bar band guitarist, but he was really good. He wasn't like wild like Vincent, but they were a good complement for each other, because Vincent could do the wild Lee Stevens type stuff. Marty could play like the really solid, bar band blazing, more standard guitar stuff. And we recorded a song called Shortchanged, which is a song I wrote, and we did 2 versions of it. And I just discovered this recently, and the other version of it has some extra background vocals from Bobby that I didn't care for, and it has a really killer guitar solo from Vincent. So there's actually 2 studio songs that, my dream that I keep pushing on Pellet, which he just doesn't seem to have the interest I have, would be to have one CD that's all the Pentagram studio recordings, right up through the Columbia ones, which were never finally mixed. I have a rough mix of the 3 Columbia tracks that were recorded a little too hot when they made a copy of it, so it's a little distorted. But I do have the 3 Columbia songs, so it would be great to have like everything from the Macabre single all the way up through the Columbia stuff on one disc, the complete Bedemon, the complete Pentagram 70s studio recordings in chronological order. I would think fans would go nuts for that, to have all that stuff away from the rehearsal stuff and everything else, just all the studio stuff on one disc. But no one else seems to be that excited about it. I have a lot of more rehearsal tapes. Like I say, I have probably 10 or 15 different reel-to-reel tapes of rehearsals. Some of it has been used on the First Days Here 2 album, mainly on disc 2. But the problem is they'd have to be baked, first off, because they're so old. And from what I heard recently was that Relapse doesn't really want to do another First Days Here album, because I think the reason was because Bobby's too much of a hassle to deal with. He's always wanting advances, stuff like that. I don't know, because they want to keep the rights to the first 2 albums, because those continue to sell, especially the first one. They just actually put out a brand new. I brought you visuals. It's not perfect because there are some unfortunate mistakes on it, but they just put out a brand new colored edition of First Days Here 1, which is kind of
cool.
like half gold and half black with some gray spots on it and stuff like that. There are some problems with it, like, for example, they didn't change the date on the back, so it says 2016, and it has the same record number as the versions that came out in 2016. So no one looking for this new version would know that it's a new reissue. And there's some other problems too, like I didn't update the liner notes, which I didn't even think about at the time. They just asked, what did I think of the color? I said, it looks great to me. Said, oh, we're putting out this summer. I said, oh, go for it. But I didn't update the liner notes. So the liner notes talk about it being 2016. And I also really am mad at myself. And this makes me sad to even say this, but I didn't mention that Greg had passed away since 2016. Because I didn't update the liner notes. The liner notes should have been updated. I mean, but there wasn't any discussion about that. But in hindsight, if they do want to keep reissuing this album, in years to come in different colors and stuff, I will definitely update the liner notes and remind them to change the date and change the record, the catalog number on the spine and stuff like that weren't taken care of. But it's cool that people to this day still love this stuff. I mean, the fact that, music I recorded in 1971, 72, 73, that people are still buying it worldwide. I mean, Pentagram just did a tour of the world. They were playing over in Europe and stuff like that. I'm not a part of that, but they're still playing things like they were doing Be Forewarned, they were doing Forever My Queen, they were doing Last Days Here. I mean, they're doing songs I played on. So it's like, and Last Days Here I wrote the music for, and Bobby wrote the lyrics, but I wrote all the music for Last Days Here. So it's nice that my 15 minutes of fame is extended on for half a century, even if I'm sadly not a part of it. I would like to. I know I'm once again rambling, shocking, but before I or Bobby are gone, since Vincent and Greg are now gone, and Randy's gone, and Skip Groff's gone. I mean, so many people in the world of Pentagram are gone, unfortunately. I would love to be on stage, one more time with Bobby and play like Forever My Queen or Wheel of Fortune or 20 Bucks Spin, just to be there. And the audience would go nuts. I mean, seeing, me and Bobby on stage playing those songs with a guitarist to be chosen. I don't think Victor would want to do it. And I don't think he'd be right for that. I don't know about Marty, Marty, the other guitarist, or Matt, is it Matt? I don't know that he'd be right, and I don't think Greg Turley would want to do it. But it would be nice if Bobby and I, before one of us is gone, could just do like a handful of gigs, a couple of gigs playing just 70s stuff. But again, I kind of put that note out there in the last few years on Facebook saying, that would be kind of a fantasy idea if we could do this, and no one ever responded. So, I mean, a couple of fans did. They said that'd be really cool. But no one from the band ever responded because they've got their new album or whatever, and they've got their tour going on. They don't want to go back to the 70s. They don't want to turn Bobby and me back to the 70s and let us get some attention and publicity and stuff. And I understand that on one hand. On the other hand, it's like you've still got the new band, and once we do the 3 or 4 gigs, you'll be back doing the new band, touring the world, releasing new albums. So just I mean, the reality is Bobby and I did co-found the band. Let us have our last moment of glory before one of us is gone. But there's only so much I can do about it. I'm in California. They're on the East Coast. I'd have to be flown back there. I'd have to get a drum kit rental, a place to practice, a place to stay, and someone had to pay for all that, like we did for Greg when Greg came out here for the Bedemon gig. But there's been no contact from anyone about it. So it's like, what is, and I'm sad to say, I don't think it'll ever happen, even though I kind of, on a musical level, wish it did. There's always the cautionary thing about working with Bobby about, what might go wrong. But, when I've seen Bobby in person when they played in California, we've always gotten along great backstage. I always get backstage passes. We always talk about old times. He remembers specific things, like when he went down and bought a certain record in the 1970s. every Thursday night, there were 3 record stores down in DC, not in the best of areas. And my dad would drive us down there in his Lincoln Continental or his Cadillac, depending on which car he was using. And he would just sit in his car by himself while Bobby and I would go to these 3 record stores that were all within 2 blocks of each other. And we would just look through the rock section, anything that had like really long hair and 10-minute long songs, his guitar, bass, and drums. It was like,
Yeah.
this is gonna be really great. And it'd be like the Frost or Ursa Major, or like Bang or Captain Beyond, or whatever. It'd be something we hadn't heard of at the time, and it looked like this is the type of album we'll probably like. And 90% of the time we were right. Once in a while we get something that'd be like a folk type album or whatever. But every Thursday night, it was the only night of the week they were open till 9 o'clock, these 3 stores. And my dad would take us down there every night. He'd get off work, he'd come pick up me and Bobby, take us downtown and let us do our record shopping. So that's how Bobby and I built up our collection together. So, I like I say, I have a lot of fondness for Bobby, but I've heard so many stories about things that have happened that I won't mention here. Maybe I'll save it for the book. People say I should write a book, about my life and include a big chunk of the Pentagram stories and stuff. And, maybe before I hate writing, but I like the result when it's done. When I was writing for Goldmine, I hated the process of writing because I'm a 2-finger typist. I never learned how to properly type. So I type with 2 fingers, then I go back and correct all the mistakes. So it takes me forever to write. But then when it's done and I get compliments and stuff and I read it back and I say, yeah, that's a pretty good review. And so I'm happy about it. So the process of writing a book, this just seems like this would be a nightmare. It'd be really cool if it was done, if I told about the first concert I ever went to, for example, at age 13 in August 1968 was Jimi Hendrix, The Soft Machine, and Heir Apparent, who were a Scottish band that Hendrix had produced. It was at the Merriweather Post Pavilion, an outdoor, it's still there. And it's an outdoor theater in between DC and Baltimore, with a roof over the seating area and then grass behind it for the general admission.
I was just there.
Yeah, well, my first concert was Hendrix in August. A week later, it was Country Joe and the Fish, and the opening act was Iron Butterfly. And In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida had just come out. It wasn't a hit yet or anything. It was pretty much unknown, but that was my second concert. The week after that, it was The Doors and Earth Opera. So I got to see Hendrix, The Doors, Iron Butterfly, and the fourth concert was Vanilla Fudge, as I mentioned. And then the 5th concert was Jeff Beck Group with Rod Stewart at the Alexandria Roller Rink.
Holy shit, you're blowing my mind, man.
And the opening act was Big Brother and the Holding Company with Janis Joplin.
Wow.
On the same bill. That was my 5th concert. So I mean, this was my introduction to live concerts was, Hendrix, Joplin, Beck, Rod Stewart. I mean, it's like, so yeah, music's been my life. There you go.
You're blowing my fucking mind, man. I mean, those are all my idols right there, you know?
You asked about tapes a while ago. Yeah, I have a lot of tapes, but it's like someone would have to, be willing to bake them, however much that costs, wherever you get that done. They'd have to be willing to release them. And like I say, from what I've heard, Relapse does not want to do any more First Days Here albums. They were at one point, I heard, planning a First Days Here 3 album, and they were possibly going to do a box set of all 3 of them boxed together, including the new 3rd album. But that was like 5 years ago, 6 years ago, pre-COVID. And the weird thing about COVID is COVID seems like this space and time where it's like no one had a life. It was like, no, that wasn't 3 years ago. That was like 5 years ago. It was back in 2007. But from what I've heard, they don't want to do a First Days Here 3. They just want to hang on to 1 and 2. So
you do have what you would consider a pretty like high quality sounding live recording from that period?
No, not high quality.
Okay. Live recording.
I have no live recordings of the 4-man lineup. I have no live recordings of the lineup with Randy. But in 1976, when Bobby, we left Bobby, we couldn't kick him out of the band because he owned the name. But we got tired of, he got busted for drugs and stuff. And there was the Kiss episode and all, and there was that wasn't so much his fault, the Columbia Records episode and stuff. And eventually we just said, Bobby's a liability, man. He's like, so we more or less left the band, and we tried out this parade of clowns as lead singers at the house where Greg and Vincent were living. These people would come in and they'd be all, full of themselves and nice guys sometimes, and they'd open their mouths and be just like, and it was like, oh God. I'll never forget this. One guy came in who looked like a 6'6" Freddie Mercury, and he had a guy behind him like James Brown had, who was holding his cape. He was wearing a cape, and he looked like Freddie Mercury, and he had this guy who didn't say a word holding his cape behind him. And then we thought, well, this guy's got some presentation effort put into this. He couldn't sing a note. We played the songs for him that I'd written to replace the ones that we didn't have because Bobby was gone, so I had to write a bunch of stuff. And he couldn't sing. He had the attitude and he had the look, and it was pretentious, but at least he tried. It wasn't just blue jeans and a t-shirt. But it was like we couldn't find a singer, so we eventually got Bobby back. We went into Underground Sound, which was a house out in Maryland. The guy had a sub basement, which is a Pentagram album title, also later in the 80s, but he had like a basement below his basement that was soundproofed. And so he was just in a regular suburban Maryland neighborhood, but he had a complete studio, Underground Sound. And we recorded 5 tracks. That's where we recorded like Much Too Young to Know, Little Games by the Yardbirds, Teaser, song I wrote. We did like 5 songs, and we got Bobby back. We decided, let's give him another chance. So we got Bobby back in the band, and he put his vocals on the tracks. And we started playing some gigs in late '76 at a place called the Keg, which was in Georgetown, a real dive bar, but we played there quite a bit. And I recorded some of those shows. And this was when Marty Iverson was in the band also on guitar. So it was Marty and Vincent both playing guitar.
Oh, nice.
So
you have Vince on guitar.
Yeah, it's got Vince and Marty on guitar, and it's the same. I in my living room I have the same reel-to-reel deck that every Pentagram, every Bedemon rehearsal, everything was recorded on. It's a Roberts 771X reel-to-reel tape recorder, and it had a feature called Sound on Sound, where you could record like a track, and then you could record a second track, and then you could bounce those 2 tracks together onto a track, and then you could add a third track, and you couldn't adjust the volume of them, unfortunately. So the more tracks you added, the more buried the earlier tracks got. But you could at least, you could add a third track if you wanted to. It would put that track on one channel and the first 2 on the other channel. But then if you want to do a 4th track, it would put the first 3 on the channel. But it had this feature called Sound on Sound, which was kind of cool because it was like almost like a mini home recording studio, a really crude version of it. But I've still got that player out there, and it's the player that I recorded every reel-to-reel thing I have on it. So I've got like 2 or 3 shows live from the Keg where we were doing those songs from Underground Sound, and Bobby was even announcing we have an EP coming out. That's how close this was going to be a reality. Was we got this EP coming out, and we were also doing some cover songs like "Funky Dogs and Nasty Kings" by ZZ Top, "Come On Part 2" by Hendrix, I think "Stutter" and "Deuce" by Kiss. So we were doing a mix of covers and Pentagram stuff. We weren't doing a whole lot of old Pentagram stuff because we were trying to be commercial. It was like, this is our last gasp. We've been doing this for 5 years. We can't get a record label interested in this. Let's at least try and get a deal, and then we can maybe sneak in some of these, more obscure, interesting songs and stuff amongst the commercial ones. And I kept a written diary around this time from 73 through the 80s. I kept a handwritten daily diary of everything, went to Columbia Record Studios, worked at Record and Tape today, whatever. No one can remember what happened at the end of 76 with Bobby, but we believe he got busted again with his girlfriend, Sherry. And it was like maybe the third time or so. And the manager just said, "We're done. We can't do this. We take 2 steps forward, and then Bobby takes us 3 steps back and gets busted again," or whatever. And so suddenly, in 77 in my diary, it's just talking about the managers and I got together to talk about future plans. And they wanted to put together this band called Sex with me and Vincent and another singer and a different bass player, and me on drums and Vincent on guitar. And there was no explanation as to what happened to Bobby at the end of 76, because we were playing at the Keg up till like November 76. And then suddenly in 77, Gordon and Steve, our managers, were talking to me and Vincent about this new band they wanted to put together. And the other guitarist would be Brett Reese, who was in a band called The Boys. And the drummer in The Boys was Joe Hasselvander. Everything comes full circle. So, right. So the drummer from The Boys, with Joe Hasselvander, who later would go on to be in Pentagram, we were going to take their guitarist, Brett Reese, and have him join Sex with Vincent. Now, Vincent wasn't crazy about having 2 guitarists in the band. I think he'd rather have had a keyboard so we could go in maybe like a Deep Purple kind of style, and he could be the only guitarist, and as opposed to having to like trade off leads and stuff. And Vincent was a much better guitarist technically than Brett was. Brett had the look. Brett had great, long blonde shaggy hair and stuff, and he moved around great and stuff. But he had, he wasn't as good a guitarist technically as Vincent. But Vincent just stood there like a mannequin, and that was the kind of the frustrating thing about Vincent. So, so yes, I have some live tapes in answer to your question from whatever year ago you asked it. But they are with Marty on guitar, and I have no tapes live of us other than the Warehouse things, which were live. I mean, the rehearsals at the Warehouse with Bobby, of all the stuff, that stuff was live technically at the Warehouse, but just not in front of an audience. But I have no concert tapes of the 4-man lineup or the Randy Palmer and Vincent lineup. So I just have some live tapes with Marty at the Keg. There you go.
So did you guys ever get to open up for any national acts? Did that ever happen?
Nope.
Oh, okay.
It was hard for us to get gigs because we weren't doing cover songs. I mean, this was the problem. Is we go to a club and they'd say, "Well, can you do 4 sets?" And it's like, well, no, you don't have 4 sets of originals, all worked up. Don't you have some dance songs? And it's like, well, not really. I mean, I remember we played at a church. I don't know how we got booked at a church one time. The pastor who was there that night could not wait to get us out of there. When he started hearing some of the lyrics and stuff like that and saw Bobby on stage with his bug eyes staring at the girls in the front row and stuff, he couldn't wait to shove our equipment out the door and get us the heck out of that church. But there are some memorable gigs. We played at a place called Bluefield, West Virginia, which was this little hick town about 5 hours away from DC. And the kids there were so starved for music that anyone that came to town, even though they had no record out, they never heard of them, they treated them like the Beatles. I mean,
like
it was like it was the kids were going nuts, and we're like playing and we're looking at each other, and it's like, we're just Pentagram playing songs they've never heard, and the kids were like, but you're playing live music, and we never get to hear live music. We're in a nowhere town out in the middle of West Virginia, and you're coming all the way out here to play for us. So it's like, so there were some memorable gigs like that where it really felt like this is what it feels like to play, in a rock band and get attention and stuff. But because we had no record label deal, that's why we couldn't get any opening act, like open for anyone at Capitol Center or Georgetown University or Falls Church Community Center, anywhere like that. We couldn't open for them because we had no label. We were just an unsigned local band playing originals. So and that was the constant problem with record labels was we don't hear anything commercial. So
right. I did want to pop this on the screen because we talked about it earlier. This Bedemon album, Child of Darkness. Now you, if I remember correctly, you played a lot of leads on this, right?
I played about I haven't got it in front of me, although I think I have it right here. Maybe I do. Maybe I don't. Let's see. I have so much records everywhere. No, I don't actually have it right in front of me. I played on about half the tracks, and I co-wrote a couple songs, Frozen Fear, and a couple others. I played a lot more guitar on the second album, Symphony of Shadows. When the first album wasn't an album, and like I've said a zillion times, Bedemon was never a band. It was just a fun project that Randy wanted to do of his songs,
Sure.
and he would ask me and Bobby to play on it. And Mike Matthews was a friend of Randy's, and he would ask him to play bass. And so we go to the warehouse once a year, record 2 songs and whatever. And 73 to 79, we recorded 12 tracks or so. But the thing was, Randy, in 2001, when the internet was really blowing up and Randy was looking online, he was looking up Bedemon, and he was finding all these things where people were talking about Bedemon because there was a guy whose name I won't mention who was a fan of...
Please don't.
Yeah, he was a fan of Pentagram and Bedemon and a lot of other hard rock, heavy metal bands, including ones from Europe and stuff. And he would ask them for tapes and records just because he was a big fan. Then he would press up copies and sell them. CDRs with Xerox covers, and whatever else. But the only good thing that came out of that, and I hate to even say that, is that people found out about this stuff. So Randy would go online and see people talking about how great Bedemon was, and it was Pentagram related, and they were saying Randy Palmer is as good as Tony Iommi in Black Sabbath, and Randy would just laugh, and he goes, "I'm not as good as Tony Iommi. I can barely play guitar. What are these people talking about? And how do they know about Bedemon?" And it's well, because of the bootlegs, because people traded around the tapes and the bootlegs and stuff. So that's like I say, I hate to give that person any credit at all because we never got a penny out of those things. But it did get the word around, and so eventually labels wanted to gather together all those songs and put them out and try and fix the sound as best we could, because they were recorded at the warehouse just like every other Pentagram rehearsal, so the sound quality wasn't good. They weren't meant for release. And I overdubbed some solos because Randy said, why don't you do a solo? Mike, why don't you do a solo? And Bobby, why don't you play some rhythm on this song? And so on the first album, I played all the drums and some guitar. And on the second album, I played all the drums and probably about 75 to 80% of the guitar solos. Randy only played one solo on the second album, and it wasn't even a solo. It was a worked out guitar part in the song. I think it's DED, Dying Every Day. He worked out a guitar part, but he had Mike play a couple solos and he had me play the rest. So it's because he just felt you guys are better guitarists than I am, and I want the music to sound as good as possible. So let's, you guys play the solos. So yeah, so I do play guitar on both Bedemon albums, but my favorite instrument to play is drums. I like sitting back behind the drums and pounding away and not having to worry about tripping over guitar pedals and having people throw stuff up at you like they're doing on stage these days. It's what's wrong with people? I've seen these videos on TV. You've probably seen them too, where people are on stage singing and a Coke bottle hits someone in the face, and it's you paid $80 to buy a ticket to the show, and now you go and throw stuff at the artist you came to see. What's wrong with you?
Right.
Oh God. Anyway, don't get me going.
Well, we touched on a few things, and these are all hypotheticals, and these maybe foreshadowed a little bit. We talked about a few things. Now, some of these are hypotheticals, but I mean, would you be interested in playing like like a project with Joe Hasselvander called like the X Pentagram or something like that, where you play the drums and he plays the guitar, or would you be interested in doing something like that?
He and I actually talked about something like that about 20 years ago. It was quite a while back. It was after he left Pentagram, but we had a phone call, and I was playing him some of the demos of some of the new Bedemon stuff.
I'm actually friends with Joe. He was in Black
Okay.
Manta for a little bit, so
Okay. Yeah, he
yeah.
played in Raven, and they played out here. But there was another concert the same night that I went to, and I wish I'd gone to see Raven, so I could have said hi to Joe, but I didn't. I'm kind of bummed about that. But yeah, Joe's one of the nicest guys. I mean, a super nice guy, and we both played, guitar, bass, and drums. So we could do an album together, both playing, all the instruments on different songs. He plays guitar on this song, I play guitar on the next song. Um, so yeah. And I did a session with a band called Blackwülf. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but their third album, which is called I wrote all this stuff down so I wouldn't say anything wrong. It was called Symphony. I know I wrote it down somewhere. Sinister Sides. Sinister Sides. They're from Oakland, California. They are fantastic. They're called Blackwülf, and the U is with the two amulets over the U.
Right.
And this is their third album, and they actually invited me to play guitar solos on 3 songs. They're heavy. They have a really good singer who sings. It's not Cookie Monster growling vocals. The songs are more like mid-tempo type stuff. And they just released their 4th album. I highly recommend you check out Blackwülf, because they're really, really good. It's really good, heavy, hard rock, really good songs, guitar, bass, drums, and singer. And the nicest guys. They paid for me to go up there and do the tracks in the studio. The thing was, the guitarist came to see Bedemon play at Psycho California in 2015, and I was being interviewed at the time, and he was talking to my then girlfriend, and so I wasn't, I didn't know who he was, and then he walked away. A couple of weeks later, my girlfriend looked on his website and then saw a link to a band, and she clicked on the Blackwülf page on Facebook, and then she immediately texted me and says, "You got to check this band out. That guy I was talking to, you're going to love this stuff." And so I checked it out, and it was like, this is awesome. So I sent him a message, and he says, "We love Pentagram and Bedemon. I'll send you all the Blackwülf albums on vinyl and CD if I could get some of those from you, and you could autograph them and stuff." So Pete Holmes and I became really good friends, and they paid for me to come up there and do the studio stuff. They paid for me to come up there for the record release party in San Francisco. They paid to fly me up there and then go to South by Southwest, and I got to play South by Southwest with Blackwülf, guesting on the 3 songs that I played on the album on. We played another gig in Austin, and then we played a gig in San Antonio. So in 2018 or 2019, it was like I was guesting with Blackwülf, and the guitarist was so ego-free as to give up 3 guitar solos on 8 songs and let me play them, and have Geof O'Keefe guest guitarist on these 3 songs, one of which was Sunshine of Your Love by Cream. But I highly recommend you check out the 4 Blackwülf albums. I think you will not have any complaints about them. I also played on a progressive rock album, which was called Sound of Dreams, by a guy named David Manassian, Minasian. He's been a videographer, a musician. He's worked with the progressive rock band Camel, done about 3 or 4 or 10 of their live DVDs. He's worked with Justin Hayward from the Moody Blues and filmed like 2 or 3 of his commercially released DVDs, which is where I first heard about him. He's a fantastic keyboard player, and I wrote to him. I wrote to him asking him if I could get a Justin Hayward DVD from him, which was a PBS only thing about the story behind Nights in White Satin, like an hour-long special, but you couldn't buy it anywhere. It was like a PBS thing. And I told him who I was, and he sends me back an email of him and his son, who's about 20, and Bobby. They had just gone to see Pentagram in LA a week earlier. So he knew who Pentagram was. I mean, small world. This progressive rock keyboard player who's working with all these progressive rock bands. Him and his son had just seen Pentagram a week earlier, and they're there in the photo with Bobby. So we became instant friends. We began talking on the phone about progressive rock, and because I love progressive rock bands in addition to heavy metal and hard. I like most music. But he asked, "Do you want to play on my next album, like on a song?" And I said, "I would love to." And he said, "It's going to have Steve Hackett from Genesis, Annie Haslam, the singer from Renaissance, Justin Hayward, Billy Sherwood from Yes and Asia." And he said, and I said, "Sure." And then like a year went by and I didn't hear from him. And then he contacts me and says, "Yeah, I've been working on a whole bunch of stuff with Justin Hayward, and now I've met Alan Parsons and I'm filming him, doing a couple of Alan Parsons shows, one with an orchestra in Europe and one without an orchestra and stuff. But I'm still working on my new album. Do you want to play drums on most of the album, so it's not programmed drums? And even would you want to play guitar on one of the songs that Justin Hayward wrote with Annie Haslam singing, who's one of my idols? I love Renaissance." So it was like, you've got to be kidding. I'm going to be playing drums on a song with Annie Haslam and guitar, and drums on other tracks that, with Steve Hackett, not in the same room, but still, it's Steve Hackett on guitar, Jeff Keefe on drums. So I'm on this album that came out in 2020 called The Sound of Dreams, which is a progressive rock album. And I'm on about 3/4 of the album on drums and guitar on the last song, which is a Justin Hayward composition, which appears on the album twice. It opens with him singing on the version 1, and it closes on the album with Annie Haslam singing from Renaissance, and that's the version I play on. So I've been around here and there, and I'm willing to do other projects. I mean, I'm willing to produce. I'm willing to produce. I'm willing to co-write. I'm willing to play drums. I'm willing to play guitar. But the problem is, I'm here in San Luis Obispo, in the middle of nowhere, and I'm not wealthy in terms of like traveling and planes and hotel rooms and renting equipment and all that stuff. So that's kind of the logistical problem. This is why there hasn't been a third Bedemon album yet, because we have, before Randy died, I mean, in the 4 months after he recorded the album, he and Mike came out from, Mike was living in Missoula, Montana, and Randy was back in, like I say, North or South Carolina. They both came out here in like April 2002, and we recorded the backing tracks for Symphony of Shadows. And then they went back home. And so where was I going with this? I was going somewhere with this story. The album, I can't believe I lost my train of thought. Well, it's not surprising. My train has many rails.
Well, you said a possible third album.
Thank you. After Randy got back home, after we had recorded the backing tracks and before the auto accident, which was 4 months later, he started writing new songs in the usual way, sitting at his kitchen counter, his kitchen table with his cassette player and his guitar, and he'd go, "Okay, it's June 3rd, and here's a new Bedemon riff for a possible song." That's all I got so far. And then the next one would be like 2 minutes long with like 4 or 5 parts. And there's like 20 of these. And his fiance, after Randy passed away, sent me the CDR of all these potential new songs that Randy had ideas for. And I've talked to Mike and I said, we could take these ideas and we could flesh them out into complete full songs and credit Randy as inspiration for, we would write the songs because we'd have to finish them and write lyrics and stuff, but we could put inspiration by Randy because we could pick the best, the best 5 to 10 songs that actually came from the mind of Randy Palmer, and we could have a third Bedemon album. The problem is Mike's in Missoula, Montana. I'm here.
That's awesome.
We want to use, we've talked to some different musicians that might want to be on guitar if I stay on drums most of the time, and a singer. We've talked to some different people, but it's just a matter of logistics. It's a matter of money for studio time, mixing, mastering, cover, trying to find a label. It's just, there's just so much involved in it. And I've never learned Pro Tools or GarageBand or any of that stuff. And plus I like to play in the room with a musician. I like to look into their eyes and feel that energy and stuff like that. I don't want to just, do this stuff by long distance. I record my part, you record your part, we'll assemble it. It's like, no, that's not playing music. I want real analog music. So, maybe there'll be a third Bedemon album. We really want there to be, but it's just a matter of time and money and logistics.
All right, well, I want to throw out just 3 last these are all like tentative things, like I said, but the one is I'm friends with the person that organizes the Doom Fest here every year, the Maryland Doom Fest, and maybe I can talk to him about maybe you and Joe and Bobby, just a tentative thing, maybe just to throw it out there. And he's a huge Pentagram fan, and just to kind of get the, just to get the conversation started, I can talk to him about that. If you're interested.
I would be interested if we can work out the logistics. And again, it's the
Sure.
money, it's the airplane flight, it's the renting of the equipment.
Sure.
Am I gonna play drums, or am I gonna play guitar? A
Well, it
hotel.
would just to kind of start
But-
the conversation. I could do that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I like the idea if the logistics can be worked out. It's the logistics that
Yeah.
always
So
stop everything.
that's one thing. The other thing is I'm friends with my friend Jim Kirkland from Dreaming City, is a small publishing company, and you absolutely should write a book. I'm a writer. I'm a writer, and I can help you if you're interested. We can talk about all that stuff later on. We can stay in touch via email. But I think your tales are incredible. I think your tales are riveting. Your tales are magical, and your tales should be told. And we can stay in contact that way as well. And I do have some minor contacts with label stuff. So we were taught, like I said, it was a bit of foreshadowing. I wanted to leave all that stuff to the end. So there is some possibilities that we might be able to flesh some of this stuff out. So we can stay in contact.
I'm trying to think if I've ever been told I have a magical tale. I don't think so. But yeah, I've been told by a number of people I should write a book, and I don't want it to be just a Pentagram book. I want it to be with the stories like me going to the Hendrix concert as my first concert.
Yeah, absolutely. We can actually stay in. Like I said, I'm a writer. We can stay in contact, and we can just back and forth, and we can flesh the whole thing out. Just to get the dialogue and the conversation going. I think it's really important.
I'm rescuing a silverfish. I don't like killing things, and a silverfish.
But it's been a pleasure talking to you, man. We definitely you just have a million stories. We definitely be interested in doing another interview sometime in the future. Do you have any final work?
Well, a Joe and Jeff album you mentioned. Yeah, I mean, a Joe and Jeff album, like I say, he and I kind of just briefly tossed the idea out during a phone call years ago, and I haven't talked to him since. But with us being able to play everything, I can't sing. So one thing I can't do is sing. I can come up with a melody that I want the singer to sing, but I can't sing. Mm-hmm. But if Joe, if Joe and Jeff got together and did like just a hard rock album with us sharing off the drums,
I reach out. I talk to Joe all the time. I'll reach out to him too,
and just do an album of all new original material, and just
that would be kick ass, man.
You get a singer. I don't know if Joe sings that much, or how he considers his vocals, but we could find a singer if if neither one of us wants to sing. But
I know a guy that sings.
Well,
you sing, Skull. There you go.
But anyway, I'll reach out to Joe. I'll like I said, I'll start the dialogue going. It was amazing talking to you. Amazing stories. I love hearing about the local DC history. You're blowing my mind a lot of the times. I'm sitting here speechless, listening to your stories, man. So it's really awesome talking to you. But do you have any last words for your fans out there?
No, I was going to tell you in terms of like stuff for the book. It's like artists I've met, like worst and best experiences with artists I've met that I admire, because there's always that old saying about, by the way, you haven't said hardly anything up there in my left corner. You haven't said hardly anything. What's on your mind?
He's blown away too.
I'm just enjoying the show. I definitely think we need to do a part 2, because I'm just loving listening to these stories.
Leslie West. I was a huge Mountain fan.
Oh yeah, wow!
I saw them right after the Leslie West Mountain album came out, before Nantucket, before the second album, Climbing. before Climbing came out. And they hadn't actually formed the band Mountain yet. They hadn't released anything as Mountain. It was just the Leslie West Mountain album. And they opened for the Steve Miller Band at American University. And so I was a huge Mountain fan from that day on. I loved his tone. I loved his style. I loved the Felix Pappalardi songs. I thought were amazing, like Nantucket Sleigh Ride and you know, One Last Cold Kiss and Pride and Passion, all the stuff that Felix wrote. Well, Leslie West was playing out here in San Luis Obispo in a little dive bar club that had like pool tables and stuff. And in the back of the club, they had this little teeny room where artists would play, and occasionally they would have name acts. Ronnie Montrose played there, where they fourth version of Gamma that they were trying to get a record label going, and he had a female on drums who might have been his wife. I heard. I could be wrong about that. And I asked him if there was any way to get a copy of the demo, and he's like, "Oh, I can't do that." But Leslie West played there, and I called Goldmine and I said, "You know, Leslie West is going to be playing here. Would you like me to do an interview with Leslie West?" And they said, "Sure, go for it." And I called Leslie West's road manager and I said, "You know, I do freelance writing for Goldmine magazine. You know, it's like the history of the band plus talking about the new album. Do you think I could do this?" And they said, "Yeah, you can do it on the tour bus before the show. So, you know, come out here, you know, around 4 o'clock or whatever." So I get out there and I get on the tour bus and Leslie's there and he's rather slim. I was surprised at how slim he was. But we start talking and I start asking him, so how, when you first met Felix, how, and within 2 questions, he turns to the road manager and goes, "This guy just wants to talk about the old stuff. We could do this by phone sometime later." And my heart's like, "Oh, man, I told the road manager exactly what this was going to be. And all Leslie wants to do is promote the new album, obviously." So I was kind of bummed about that. So I got up to leave and said, "Yeah, we'll do this by phone, but it won't be the same." And I said, and I've struggled with weight issues most of my life. And I asked Leslie, I said, "By the way, you look really good. You know, what's your diet secret?" And he says, "I have diabetes, straight face. No joke." And I'm like, "Okay, nice meeting you." And it's like, because like, that wasn't the answer I was expecting. I jog every day. I've cut out carbs, whatever. But it was like, "No, I have diabetes, straight face, staring me in the eyes." And it's like, okay, this was probably the most embarrassing, worst interview I've ever done. So there you go. But yeah, I mean, I got tons of. I mean, I met Brian May. I've met a ton of people. I met Black Sabbath at a Holiday Inn when Gordon Fletcher, the guy from Cream, Rolling Stone Circus, was managing us. He found out what Holiday Inn they were staying at when they played at the Capitol Center, and we went to see Black Sabbath in the Holiday Inn afterwards, after the show, and they were in the dining room, which was closed except for Black Sabbath and the road crew, and there was a band playing. And it was a 2-man band, a drummer with a guitar in his lap and a bass player. And they were doing like cover songs as Black Sabbath is sitting there at this long table. And Randy and I are running around talking to Tony Iommi going, "Whatever happened to this album by this band called Necromandus?" Because in Melody Maker, there was a full-page ad for this album called Necromandus on Vertigo Records, produced by Tony Iommi, and it never came out. He goes, "Yeah, I swear, the album never came out." It did eventually come out, like 10 years later, 15 years later. But Randy and I were like running around asking, you know, all the members of Black Sabbath questions, and amongst the road crew and the girls and everything else. So it's like, I've got tons of stories like that would fill the book. And it would be just like little vignettes, like, you know, turn to any page in the book, and there's a story about meeting this artist. Here's a story about how I lost my virginity and how I wish I could get it back. Here's a story about, you know, whatever. So yeah, I would make it funny. I would make it interesting. It would just be a matter of buckling down. But, you know, I have an office. I have a house to declutter. I have so much stuff to sell on eBay. I have so many rare posters, and working in record shops for so many years, I have posters and pins and press kits and, you know, rare non-LP singles from Italy. And I mean, I have so much stuff to sell that I need the money, but it's really hard to do it alone. And I don't have a significant other. I don't have any kids. One of my closest friends died of cancer 3 months ago, and the other one is in Oregon. So I will have no close friends here in about 2 weeks. So it's, you know, it's not a great time in life for me to be taking on projects with a lot of like happy gung-ho enthusiasm without some assistance. But it's hard to find assistance when your friends are in DC, they're in LA, they've got wives, kids, jobs, and everything else.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I probably shouldn't have even gotten into this topic of you know, depression and that type of stuff. But yeah, it's not. This is why I don't work on projects like the book. It's like, you know, I got to be in the right spirit to really be excited about doing something, and you know, so. There you go. I hope I've given you enough for at least a 5-minute interview of coherence, or a
Well,
3-hour.
do you have any last words for your fans out there?
I'm going back to sleep. No, I'm really I'm blown away to the point of I got a letter in the mail once from a guy this was 15 years ago, and he was in Texas. It was a handwritten letter on lined notebook paper, and he got my address, I guess, from the PO box on the Bedemon website before Facebook. And he wrote me a letter saying how he had like been suicidal and stuff like that and everything else, but then he discovered, you know, Pentagram and Bedemon, and wow. Like it really made him, you know, have a reason to live, and he started learning music and stuff. And I was crying. Sunglasses. I'm sitting in the post office parking lot reading this letter from this guy who was suicidal, and our music turned his life around.
Heavy.
The same thing happened when I played at Psycho, California. We did an interview after we played up on the rooftop of the building. This guy videotaped an interview with us. And after the interview, he told me that at one point in his life, he had two roads to make. One was to join gangs, or the other was to get into music. And he got turned on to either Pentagram or Bedemon or both, bought a guitar and went into music. And all of us were crying. It was like, you know, I think that music I did 45, 50 years ago has like changed people's lives like that. And I've heard from a number of people who were suicidal, a female friend of mine, whose name I won't mention, but, you know, she also is, you know, she said Bedemon kind of changed her life when she heard it. And it blows me away that the music means that much to it. And it's too bad we couldn't get the recognition for it back when we were making it, you know, and I couldn't have been on stage playing these songs and, you know, touring the world and stuff like Bobby is getting to now with people who had nothing to do with the music that's on the records that they're playing, like Forever My Queen and stuff. And I'm not bitter about it. Seeing other people playing my drum parts and stuff, but it'd be nice to be, you know, it'd be nice to be able to play some of that stuff and get some recognition for it after all these decades. Yeah, so I probably said way too much. So edit out all the parts that, you know, that lawyers might take a look at, and you'll have about 3 minutes of usable material.
That's been fantastic. Really appreciate your time, Geoff, and yeah, definitely so many stories. We'd love to have you back for another part too. I'm sure Skull will be up for that.
Anytime. I'm sure I've only barely touched on these stories that I've been saving for the book, and I'll still save some more for the book. So, or I'll just make some. I'll just make some up. Yeah, I jammed with Hendrix.
Well, I have one last thing to say, and that is, remember, look to the stars, carry the torch of enlightenment, and strive to be a disciple of rock and roll and the Brotherhood of Orpheus. Rock and roll, my friend.
Check out Blackwülf. Do my friends a favor and check out Blackwülf. You won't regret it.
All right, rock and roll, my friend.
They're my eyes. They're my eyes. Just to see that I have eyes. But now I'm going back to sleep. All right. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Great back and scream. colossal demonic. Astronomers warn, a disturbance ionic. He won't give it back. The donut colossal, he awakens the wrath of the 50-foot asshole. Advertising's the blame for the rampage of giants. Lard Lad enraged, Brockman turned silent. See man, who knows the mascots of Achilles without the intention. goddamn bone. Springfield's future's looking sweet. Time to move the family down the side. we scream, yeah!
Stinktown.